to get you guys all the meeting info. A new glitch out of the blue I've never seen. It wouldn't let me log on to the campus email to email you from my laptop, which I did all through last semester. So don't ask me what that's about, but I'll figure that out. I had to go out to a separate building where I have my old PC and emailed you from there. Okay, so now you know if there was a delay, it wasn't my being forgetful. Okay, welcome everybody. It's nice to see such a good turnout. And this is an important detail. Let me start by letting you guys know that those of you who do log on will almost do better in terms of your grade. And the last Zoom classes I taught last semester, it was a consistent trend that people that only watch the video, which you have the option, of course, you can't make it to every Zoom class in real time. I totally understand that. So you have the option of watching it on Zoom, this lecture, by 6 p.m. Friday of that same week. It'll be posted under, week one lecture or, 1.1. You'll see it on Zoom. It won't be hard to find. I'll send you instructions as well before I send the first lecture like this one. But if you aren't in the class in real time, you'll miss out some aspects of things. For instance, a chance to ask questions. I don't I don't mute. I'm sorry. Any of my students. You do that yourself if you choose to. So I encourage you to participate by asking live questions, and that worked well for at least some students in the last Zoom sessions I taught last semester. But of course, you don't have to say a word to get an A in this class. We're going to go over how you get graded and all that in just a couple of minutes. The catching my breath because I had to go. My old PC, it's like 9 years old, is not in this house, in my house. So that's why I was running late to get you the info. But thank you all for your patience. I think that's a good sign. Okay, I'm going to start by saying welcome. This is what I would have said first. So starting over, welcome to Art 1.1, where we cover over 15,000 years of art history from 5 continents, and where we're going to take a few trips during the semester where you won't have to take notes or be tested on. And those will be slides at the end of, about half a dozen, maybe more of the lectures out of the 16 weeks of new lecture material that you won't be tested on in the last like 20, 25 minutes of certain classes. And I always tell you ahead of time, will be slides of my own that I've taken from where I have traveled to the sites that are in the syllabus. I've been all over Egypt. I've been inside King Tut's tomb. I think you'll find that interesting. Some of you may know, they just found a new set of tombs just outside the step pyramid. It's called, we're going to talk about all that when we get to ancient Egypt in about 3 weeks. As well as to Rome multiple times, all over Greece, and Stonehenge, which we will see next week, my own slides of Stonehenge. So the class will be more than just a lecture with you taking notes, although that is a large part of the format. Also, you have extra credit options. We're going to go over those together in just a few minutes. And those would be a way for you to increase your letter grade by the end of the semester or anytime during it by up to 50 points, which out of 400, you can do the math. Some of you, that's a whole letter grade or a little over, because if you were getting a B and you add 50 points extra credit, you raise yourself to an A. So you have a lot of options to get a good grade in this class, but it does require, making sure you take either reasonably good notes or record material, however you choose to do that. But the tests, I'm going to go ahead. I have a list of things to tell you. Advantages of Zoom classes. I don't prefer them. I much prefer in person. I've been teaching at this college for 24 years, longer than I'm sure many of you have been alive. And yet I never get tired of teaching at Santa Rosa. I've taught at 10, it's 8 JCs, including the Santa Rosa, and 2 universities, art history, the same subject. Over the 2.5 decades I've been teaching this subject. And in all that time, the classes I enjoy teaching the most are the Santa Rosa classes. The students have more variety of experience, of life experience, as well as, a more variety of personal experience, artistic talents or things that they've, learned by, study, travel, life, work, what have you. And I'm going to ask you guys to give me a mini bio, which will be worth 5 points right off the bat, extra credit. I'll get to that in a few minutes, how to do that. Just a paragraph. And that'll be my way of taking attendance. If I had to call out 50 names, well, that's how much you want was. Now it's 44 on the screen here. Every night, that would waste time, and we're not in high school. So I don't take roll orally. I did when I was teaching in person. Of course, it's a little different because I could just check you off on quickly on the physical roll sheet. So the way I will take attendance, it's only going to be the first 2 weeks, and I'll send you an email tomorrow to remind you of this, is to have you submit by PDF every assignment. By the way, I've said this in one email I've sent everyone. You should have hopefully read that, which is that this isn't my rule. It's the JC rule that all communications and especially all assignments from students need to be in PDF format, as do all my documents, which I've now already sent you the first 3. I hope you all have them and have printed them out. You should have them with you each night, which are, of course, the syllabus, the course grading policies. We're going to go over that first. And then a list of terms to know that'll help you organize your notes during the slide lectures. Okay, but another advantage of this Zoom class format is that the tests are open book by definition, and you'll have more time. You'll have at least 72 hours, or should I say, yeah, okay, more than 48 hours till the end of that week when I give the midterm, and again on the final of those weeks. You will have until midnight on that Friday to turn your test in. So you got plenty of time to look at your notes. And I think if everyone, that's why I say, if you're here each week and you take good notes, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get a good grade, an A or at least a B in this class. Because obviously I wouldn't have, even if I felt inclined to try and find out if you answered everything, on your own during the real test. The test will be given in real time. And then the recording of it, in case you can't attend that lecture, will be on the YouTube, just like all the other lectures. So you see, the point is that you shouldn't have a lot of stress or test anxiety, as is often the case with in-person college exams, as I well know from my BA and MA degrees at UC Berkeley, where I studied history and then art history. Okay, so let me just go down this list quickly because, for instance, if you are not, as many of us aren't, and I include myself, financially well off, and textbooks are an important part of this class, you will need to use them to get to do well on your papers, because those are, just like they would be in an in-person class. There are 2 papers. They're worth the same amount each paper as each of the 2 exams. So if you bomb one of those 4 assignments, like say you didn't do well in the midterm, which I just mentioned why you shouldn't have that problem, but if somehow you didn't do well, or you didn't do a good job on your first paper because you've never written art history paper and you just rushed it through on the last night, not a good idea, but people do, you can recover from that and still get possibly even an A in the class with the extra credit options. And the fact that no one assignment is a do or die. UC Berkeley, they used to make the final worth half the grade or a third of the grade for the entire semester. I never thought that was reasonable, so I don't do that. We'll get to the details of grading in a few minutes, but just to finish up my heads up list, I call it. So the first 2 weeks of the semester, we're supposed to take roll however we want. I just mentioned, and I will give you the details of what you can write on your, I call it mini bio, PDF that you should send me, and how to do that in a few minutes. But if you don't do that, by the end of the second week, I won't know for sure that you intend to continue in the class. And I don't have the decision in this. The college requires us by the 3rd week to submit what's called no-show drop list of people that didn't participate fully in or at all in the first 2 weeks, and we're supposed to drop them. So it's important to remember that if you forget to do and I'll send you a reminder, and also in the lecture next week verbally, again, remind you that if you didn't already, you should send me your mini bios, which you will not have. It won't be hard to do. It'll take you a few minutes. It also helps me to know the background of the variety of types of experiences you have. And many of the students in my classes every semester, including last one on Zoom, had some really great artwork that they created. And that's also worth extra credit. Again, we'll talk about how you can get, what ways there are to get extra credit in a little while. But if that applies to some of you, say that in your mini bio, and then you have that option of submitting a PDF of some of your, of the images, or a screenshot. That would work, but in PDF format, so I can open it as all PDFs, right? They're the most versatile or accessible, I guess is the word, of all types, of course, of internet documentation or formats. That's why the college requires them for all of their students and professors. So, okay, so you have 6 weeks before the first paper's due. That's another thing. So you don't have to really stress out the first 2 or 3 weeks. Just listen and take notes and ask questions, and email me if anything isn't clear after the lecture, or a question occurs to you between classes. I check my email about 5 or 6 days a week. I check my voicemail 7 days a week. So all of that contact information is at the top of the course grading policies. Now I'm going to switch to speaker view. Let's see, it should do that. Here, let me get rid of this box over here. No, I don't want to end meeting. Nope. Okay. All right, let's just do this. I think it'll just widen up speaker view here, because I have to show you some things and it would be easier. Here we go. I know it takes a couple of steps. I do want to say something. Some of you may have heard this. There were rumors about, well, there weren't rumors. There were actual case histories. I know I have friends of mine who are teachers, of people doing, obscene and racist and all kinds of objectionable crap that was posted, Zoom bombing, it was called. You may have heard about that over the late spring. I didn't try to do Zoom classes in the spring or the summer. They didn't offer any art history classes in the summer, at least not for me. I don't think anybody taught art history last summer. They may this summer. So I've only been doing this for one full semester. But the point is that it does have, I think it's the most user-friendly of all the platforms. I experimented with some of the other options, that one could use, but the college does recommend we use Zoom. And the other rumor, it may not be a rumor, is that the Chinese, dictatorship is listening into us, in Beijing. I don't buy that, but if it's true, there's nothing they could use, I don't think, in an art history lecture in a community college in California that's going to help them to, gain any benefits. So I don't think that's true. In any case, it's the most user-friendly for both the participants and for me as an instructor. Okay, so a few more announcements and we'll get to going over the grading policies, and that's where you might have questions. I will always pause, I try to remember, at the end of each major either document or topic, and certainly at any point you can ask a question. And there's two ways to do that, right? There's the chat, and actually, let's see, it looks like I might have one person asking a question. Oh, we're not, okay, good question. I sent you guys an email on this, but you probably haven't seen it. I do not use, I know some people go, huh, why not? There are reasons. I don't want to waste your time or bore you with, but I give it a lot of thought. I don't use Canvas. So how do I grade? It's a pretty simple process of submitting all your assignments, 2 papers and 2 tests, midterm and final, and then any extra credit as a PDF file to my AOL email. Now, some of you will just roll your eyes at that. What, AOL? Yeah, I've had the same AOL address longer than, again, many of you probably have been on this planet since 1996. And as much as people make fun of it or disparage it, it is a simpler, cleaner way of keeping track. I've done that with my readers and they agree with it too. We're talking about readers in their 20s now. I've hired, and they don't give us money to pay our readers. We pay them out of pocket. The readers who read the papers, and then I double check their work. So I will grade at least one of each of your assignments, one of each of your tests, and one of each of your papers. If a reader grades the other one, I don't just log it in blindly. I want you to know that. These readers are past A students from these very classes, so they know what they're doing. But I double check their work. And occasionally they'll miss something and I'll add points, and you have the right to question anything that isn't clear. Most people get really good grades on their papers if they don't wait till the last 2 days before it's due to prepare them. Okay, so the point is that is how you will get graded. You'll submit a PDF, please, no other formats, because they're not necessarily accessible for me or the readers. And then between me and the readers, within usually 2 weeks after the on time, if they're on time, assignments are turned in, I will have the grades and I will send you, you will have to email me if you want them. I'm not going to talk about it and of course give a blanket email to everybody and see who got what score and how all the other students in your section did. So individually, you can query me at any point during the semester about anything relating to your grades, whether it's how many points do I have? Did I get extra credit for this? What grade did I get on my first paper or my midterm? And then I will contact you after the first set of papers proactively. I'll do that, which makes it easier for that person. How will I do that? Because I'll have your email addresses, right? So then I have them stored and then I can send you your grades. And that's about this equivalent of what you do if you were on Canvas. So no, you don't have to deal with Canvas for this class or any other class that I might teach. I never use it when I taught in person. I much preferred handing students their papers in person, privately, of course, with the grade facing down. We don't do that. Obviously, can't do it through a computer screen. So you'll get an email about how and what you missed. You'll have
So we don't have quizzes?
No quizzes. No quizzes. Yeah. Just the 4 assignments, which I was about to start in on, but I did want to mention one more thing, which is that there are service interruptions. Big surprise, right? In the middle of lectures, you can, have a internet disconnect or even just a one of those, freezes that happens right on the screen, which happened. Luckily, I'm knocking on wood here because I'm sitting in my own home bedroom. That's a poster of Chicago, my hometown, behind me there, from the 1930s. Not that old, but a reproduction of it. So if you're curious where I am, I'm at home in Berkeley, where I've lived since I was a student at UC Berkeley. So obviously it's been my home for a long time. Anyway, the point is that I will occasionally, if we have any kind of temporary freeze, it resolves itself like 90% of the time. And that could happen at your end and not at mine, or both on my end and yours, or just on my screen. So if that happens, be patient and give it a minute or so, and it usually corrects itself. But if we completely, God forbid, but it's only happened once last semester, once, completely booted a whole class, that Zoom session gets, then I will, here's what I'll do, and then we'll get to the grading policies handout in just a minute. If we have that type of full-on service interruption, I will start a new meeting and send you all the Zoom info within 10 minutes. So don't leave unless, it's like, how the rule is about if a teacher doesn't show up for 15 minutes, I think it's state law, or maybe it's just the policy of each school district, the college district, that if a teacher isn't in the classroom within 15 minutes, or doesn't communicate that they're on their way after, which happened to me a lot on the San Rafael Bridge, an accident, and they're going to be 5 minutes later, you have the right to leave. Well, I have a 10-minute rule. It's not likely to happen. If we're lucky, there seem to be less. Now watch. I don't want to tempt the Greek gods. They're very vengeful. Some of if you know your Greek mythology, we're going to talk about that. What happens when you get too cocky or confident, and the gods don't like that. So I'll just say, with any luck and the blessing of the gods, plural, unplural, that we won't have a full-on interruption. But if we do, give it 10 minutes max. And if I haven't gotten back to you with a new Zoom meeting intro, then you're free to move on, in which case we'll make up for what was missed the following week and cut something from that so we don't get behind. Okay. Any other questions now that are of that type? That was a good question. Verbally or with chat, either one. Okay, let's do this now. Let's do the grading policy handout. You should have that with you, and I'm not gonna literally go line by line on the computer screen. I just want you to see this is the handout we're going to spend the next several minutes talking about. So you should follow along. I'm not going to read you some of the boilerplate. That's a waste of time. That's true for every class at any college. But I'm going to talk about the texts. One of my readers told me, my longest term reader who's been with me, working with me for over 2 years, is now at Sonoma State University on a scholarship. And I helped write the letter to help her get one of several letters to get that. Anybody in my classes who gets an A, I'll be happy to write you a nice letter of recommendation for any type of admission to a college, a scholarship, a job application. Always keep that in mind, even if it's 5 years from now. Okay, so there are two texts that are required in this class, Art 1.1. Art History Volume 1 by Stockstead. That's the preferred department choice. It's a very inclusive, multicultural. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she was definitely one of the first nationally known textbook, art history textbook authors to include artists of color and, alternative lifestyles, and of course, more women. And so we use that book in most of the art history classes at this college. And I used it when I taught at Berkeley City College too. It was well received there. So that book is available, as some of you already know. I hope most of you have gotten it. If you haven't, you should before the next class. There are reading assignments, but they're not that, one chapter, sometimes less, part of a chapter each week. That's pretty reasonable. So those of you who have concern about the price, there are two options. You can, of course, obviously everyone knows, go on Amazon and find it used, all right? Or you can buy the loose leaf edition, but that's not that much cheaper. I'm sorry to say, textbook authors have no control over the price of their books, none. And it's a publisher and they gouge. We all know that. So if you don't want to do that, or you can't afford to, you can either buy a used edition from Amazon or any other, I guess you could try other websites that might have, maybe eBay, I don't know. But Amazon would be your best bet, obviously. And then the other choice is to rent them. But you know what? I couldn't get the information from my reader. She's having a crisis. One of her in-laws has passed away from COVID in Santa Rosa. She's a healthcare worker. She just got her shot. She told me, but then I didn't think to get the details from her, and I'll probably get an email from her by tomorrow. So I don't know how you do that. How do you, does anybody know? Can anybody speak up and tell us, or do it,
Yeah, it's essentially you go to whichever website happens to offer rental. The bookstore does them sometimes, as well as Chegg. There's other websites, and you can set the terms for a lot of them where you can rent it for 180 days or a year, or you can actually set the return date in some websites.
And of course, it's an online edition, right? Which is all you need, right? I assume it's
right.
What else would it be? They're going to mail you one if you're renting it.
You can rent the digital version, or they will actually send you the physical book.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that was an option.
If I may speak up.
Yes, please.
I actually just rented out my book from Amazon. It's just $50. Highly recommend.
Oh, okay. Wow! From Amazon, which Stockstead or
$828? So they'll give you $180 for the full semester. More than enough. The class.
Great, thank you. You know what? If you wouldn't mind, if you can post that, well, at the break would be fine. I don't want you to get behind because we have a lot to cover before. We take a break every night, by the way. I mean, it's a 2.5 to 3 hour class. And some nights we'll need to go almost, but not quite 3 hours. But I give you 15 minutes is enough. We're all at home, right? I used to do 25-minute breaks when it was in person on campus. And then we can end that way. We can end 10 or maybe 15 minutes early some nights. Anyway, the point is that the person, I don't know who was that, Wayne, was that you? That was somebody was telling us now, whoever that was, about the option of doing, I assume you meant it was Stockstead for, I think I heard 58, you were breaking up. But if you could post that, if not now, then at the break for students to see, in the chat function, if you could do that.
I was able to find it for free on
what?
I was able to find it for free. It was on a website that has like a ton of different college textbooks available in PDF
form. What website was that? I've never.
Skylar, do you know the website where we got our textbooks from?
It's the one I showed you?
Yeah, the one you showed
yes. I'll pull it up really quick.
It had like a bunch of different ones. I wasn't able to find the Gill one. I had to rent that from the JC. But
They
it's
let you
a,
run it, good, because that helps right there. Everybody hear that? So I guess we don't need to do the chat posting. You guys are all hearing this, I hope, right? Because
yeah.
this is very valuable information. But if you don't know what the website is that something you can send us the name of
It's
it
called
during?
zlib.org. I'll put a link in the chat.
Okay, a link in the chat. That's perfect. That's just what, you know,
Yeah.
this will strike some of you as not so surprising, which I hinted at before. I have gone from being totally tech incompetent to being barely but adequately passable. So when you guys do these things to help your fellow students, I know they appreciate it, but I want you to know how much I appreciate it. And if at some point something more complex comes up, that requires a paragraph or a link to a long article or an explanation and a link, and you send it to me in a way, as in a PDF, right? I think that's right, or a screenshot. I could then forward to the students. I'll give you 5 points extra credit, but not right now because it's too complicated to do that. So you're being very helpful. Thank you, each person who just spoke up. Yeah, and then the other textbook, Gil, speaking of which, she's a retired art department chair, and she's the one that asked me to interview for this job back in 1996. And when I heard her say Santa, I didn't know where she taught. I knew she was an art history professor. She had taken walking tours of Berkeley architecture with me and taken adult evening classes where there's no grades and no credit several times from me. I used to teach at the Berkeley, Oakland, Piedmont adult school classes, a class I created in architecture. And that segued into this job. She has written a great book, and it should only be $40 minus whatever the discount for used is, but the publisher has bumped the price. I know the publisher contacted me and said, are you going to still use this textbook? So I asked this college bookstore to go ahead and order. Well, I said 40. I was guesstimating how many. There's 50 enrolled, and we see 44 here tonight. So if you can find it, and I think you can, as a rental or online, obviously Sarah Gill and I won't have a problem with it. So do check those other websites. And I didn't know that it was any of the books were ever free. Okay, so those 2 books will help you. The Gale book will help you with the paper, definitely. And we're going to talk about what she says beginning next week. You don't want to miss that lecture because you will have questions. And if you're not in the real-time class, you're not going to get a chance to ask them, which are the 9 elements of composition. You haven't seen the handout because I haven't sent it yet. I didn't want to overwhelm you with all 8 or 9 handouts for the whole semester all at once, because we'll get to them, bit by bit. So next week you will get a couple handouts. One of them will be the main topic for the first half, which is how do artists use color, line, shading or modeling, it's called. How do artists depict space, the different techniques. And Sarah Gill's book is the most readable version of explanations for those things. And she taught at Columbia. She created this concept of how to teach with these methods, and I use them to grade your papers, and you will use them to write your papers. So you do need that book, or some way, however the cheapest way you can get, and you should have it, all semester, not just for the first paper. Okay, and then Stockstead, yeah, you need it each week to rereading. Okay, moving on to the grading system. I already hinted at this, but let me summarize it briefly again. There's 4 assignments, each one worth 100 points. First, there's a short paper, 6 weeks into the semester. Then the midterm, about, I think it's 3 weeks to the 9th week after that. It's all in the syllabus, these deadlines. Number 3, your second paper, usually about halfway between the midterm and then the finals, of course, whenever they schedule finals, which is this week. It's, semester. It's a week before Memorial Day. So your grades will be, you see down there, A's, 90 to 100%. That's standard. I don't grade on a curve. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not worth time going into. But if you're at that point where, like I said a few minutes ago, you're on the cusp between an A and a B, or whatever grade you want, between a B and a C, you can easily boost your grade up that next rung or that next grade above it by doing, depending on how many points you've earned, not waiting until final exams week, please, because I don't accept extra credit after exam week is over. I have to enter all those grades. I'll be sending you emails about all this. Maybe I've been told I email more than most professors on a regular basis, but I think it's helpful for you guys between classes. And then any question you send me an email to, I will respond as soon as I see it, of course. So if, in other words, in order to pass the class, depending on whether you're taking this for credit, non-credit, or pass, not pass option, I think they call it that. They changed that terminology, but this semester it's lately pass, not pass, right? Yet some of you maybe, you need to get 70% of the total possible, which is 280 points out of 400. And for those of you who are at that point, if you're one of those taking it for only for pass or credit or pass, not pass, you might not have to take the final. And I can tell you that. You have to ask me, of course. I won't volunteer that information because I have a lot. By finals exams weeks, I'm usually backlogged with late papers. Oh, that's an important thing. We'll get to that at the end. I do accept late work. And I've been told by all the readers I've ever worked with, you're too lenient. You let people do work as late as the last week of the semester that was due to the beginning or near the beginning. I look at it this way. My daughter is ADH. Yeah, I don't mind saying that. She might kick me in the butt if she heard me say it. She's a high school senior and she is at Albany High School, even though we live in Berkeley. There's some cross district enrollment. It's a good high school and the teachers are great. But she was struggling before the pandemic. She's doing better now with the Zoom class. All their classes, of course, are Zoom. And so I understand this struggle people often have with different levels of getting things done on time and submitting. But you will have points off. If you submit a paper late, it's 10 points off. That's pretty reasonable. It doesn't go up, in other words, because my philosophy, as is the philosophy of most of the teachers of my daughters, I'm glad to see at their high school, is that, hey, if you keep adding points off every week that something's late, after a while, why do it? Drop the class. You have no chance to catch up. I don't like that philosophy. So I only take a maximum of 10 points off. And it's only 5 points off if you submit it less than a week from the deadline. And then it's no points off. This is not my policy. This is the college. If you had any kind of family or medical emergency, but you do have to provide written proof. Again, not my policy. The college says that. And that's easy to do. A screenshot of a prescription or a visit to a clinic. These days, it might be hard to get into clinics, but hopefully that'll abate soon. They're saying that hospital admissions, or is it ICU, is actually rising in the Bay Area. Let's knock on wood that keeps happening. Anyway, the point is you have to show me something in writing, and that can be a screenshot, or a PDF or something like a doctor's visit, a prescription, or an emergency family situation where you had an accident, God forbid, but it does happen, and you weren't able to, do the work that week or a work-related emergency. But it does have to be some evidence in writing that I can see and fairly assess that you're, being honest. And of course, then you get an extension of a week with no points off. So that is my late policy. I just jumped to the last line. I should have waited. It's at the bottom of this 2-page handout. So we've covered that. Any questions about anything we've covered so far? Because then I'm going to talk about the extra credit. And that's very valuable for all of you who, like I said, might be just on the cusp between one and another grade or the next higher grade.
I have a question, but it's not about anything you've covered.
Sure, please go ahead.
I have a very odd form of deuteranomaly, color blindness. Is that going to be an issue?
Oh, I have a cousin who has. I haven't seen him in so long. I don't. Okay. Well, then when it comes to analyzing color, remind me. In fact, you know what? Just send me an email reminding me of that on my AOL is best. It won't. No one else will see it. No one's ever hacked. Again, not on any of my AOL documents, accounts, or anything. But the point is that I do need to have that information and set it aside. So I'll personally grade your papers, well, at least the first one. And when it comes to analyzing color, are you saying have you ever done anything when it comes to using colors in an art class or art history or any other analysis?
Yeah, I haven't had to deal with it as far as
Sure.
like a class goes.
Well, then, yeah, then what I would do is just give you, just give you a pass on that one part. It's not a huge part of the total grade for each of the two papers. Um, and you don't have to analyze color on either of the two exams. Okay. So if your vision is normal in other ways, it won't impair you on the
Yeah.
exams. Okay. I'll explain more if you want me to, but let's, just say for now, send me an email. Remind me of that.
Will do.
What
Okay,
is your
thanks.
email? What is that AOL email?
Yes, sure. It's at the top of each of these handouts, but I will give
Is
it
it?
to you.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. Sorry, I didn't see it.
Sure. Right. That's okay.
Um,
You can always email me with questions and extra credit I'll accept on either email address, but the assignments I need to have them on AOL, and it just proved to be a wise decision. If you want to know, I'll summarize it. There's so much, excuse me, my French, KRAP, that we get every day on the campus website that's irrelevant to most of us. It's everything you can imagine, including advertisement, contact from, you're part of the class of 56. I'm not that old. I'm not 90 years old. I'm getting up there, but what? How did they get my name? I went to high school with Kurt Russell, the actor, right? Who's some say not married, but might as well be to Goldie Hawn. No, nobody knows that. Yeah, he's the action actor. Yeah, he and I used to joke about that by long distance through his manager about how people were mixing up, him from somebody else at another high school. Well, he's pretty famous, at least among people who follow his movies. So don't, if you want to make sure you get my attention quickest, it is best to email me on AOL, but I do accept any inquiry of any kind or any extra credit on either website. Either email, I'm sorry. And the campus email is right here again, mwilson@Santa Rosa, but it's safest to do it through AOL because I can navigate that site much easier.
I just want to make sure that all the assignments are through email and there's no other.
Oh, no, there is
format.
another option, but it's unlikely to appeal to many of you. You can mail me a hard copy. I'll give you my address. Not going to give it out now till 44th. But I will. I've had some students prefer that, or even sometimes they're extra credit, which we're about to get into what that means. What are your options? So you could do that. And in a few cases, some of my students, including even, millennials and Gen Zers, right? My daughter's a Gen Zer, right? Where is the cutoff? No one can tell me between millennials and Gen Zers.
Still
But I
being
know
determined.
What year is it? Is it 95, 96, 97, 98? I've heard all the above. It doesn't matter. What the point is that I've had students from a variety of backgrounds over the years want to mail me, even when we were in-person classes, but they were gone, like out of town on a family business or trip for 2 weeks or something. You can do that. But really, those are the only two ways. Since I can't meet you in person and you can't hand it to me, right? Unless you want to come to Berkeley, then you can do
That's
it.
a little far.
Yeah.
For the
Sure. Another question?
yeah, it's like slipping halfway out my brain right now.
Okay, if you think of it, we'll get back to it. Okay, let's do this thing because I want to get to the topic for the first half. We're going to do slides after, but don't go away because you'll get a very clear indication.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
My question is, how are we supposed to do extra credit?
Oh, I'm about to do that right now. Okay, let me tell you. Okay, so
go to museum or ticket stuff. How are we supposed to go to the museum?
Well, let's talk about that. That's a good question. Since there are several categories, let's address each one. And then we'll be done with this, first handout, and we can segue to talking about the first topic for tonight before the break, which we'll end with at the break. We'll take a break at about 8. Now, see, I'm used to teaching at 7. That's another thing. They moved this class back half an hour. We'll take a break at about 8, not 8:30, for 15 minutes. But after that, don't go away. We will have we're starting slow, 4 slides. And by the end of tonight, with any questions you have, of course, you should be pretty clear on how to effectively take notes in this class so that you can study for them efficiently. Okay, extra credit. Let's do that now. It's at the bottom of page 1. And of course, a very good point that I forget who it was just raised. I can sometimes tell when I see you on the upper part of the screen. But in any case, it's a good question. An art museum. Okay, guess what? They had the exhibit of Frida Kahlo open, and I had scheduled to go there with a couple of my readers to preview it for your purposes if you wanted to write your papers. By the way, your papers can be on any art subject of visual art. It can't be on dancers. This is not a performing arts class, but any visual art, photography, painting, drawing, sculpture, or architecture. Those are the 5 visual art categories. So any work of art that's not your own. So you don't have to limit it to what we cover in class, right? You can make it an artist you know personally if you want. Then part of your research is interviewing the artist. We're going to talk about how to write the papers. It's 6 weeks from now before they do. In detail, 2 weeks from now. So let's put that off. But I just want you to know, you guys have total freedom of what type of artwork you want to write about. But anyway, Frida Kahlo, you might think, what's she have to do with ancient art history? Nothing. She's obviously a 20th century Mexican painter, one of the most famous, and rightfully so. Her exhibit was open of her work at the Legion of Honor. I got that right. Yeah. And they closed it at the last second, right? Literally 2 days before I was scheduled to go. So if that is the case, in other words, you can't use that option. But I'm going to predict, again, knock on wood, that at least some Bay Area museums, art museums, that is, will open again before finals. So if that happens, okay, if you have that option, it's an easy thing to do. I don't expect you to write anything or explain anything. Just prove you went to the museum. What you do when you're inside is your business. And of course, I can tell you, I think they're the safest places in public venues, other than outdoor dining. Oh, well, I don't want to get into that. There's no solid evidence that outdoor dining is one of the main spreaders, but whatever, we got what we got with the shutdown, and we want to get past this surge, obviously. So once they judge, that is the Bay Area health departments of each county, right? Most we're talking about San Francisco, but there are museums in Sonoma County, you know that, right? Right there in Santa Rosa, that it's safe in that county. You could easily, I'd say it's 50-50 or better, but you'll have that option. And if you do, you just give me, you can't give me the ticket stub, you have to email it, or the receipt that shows the date and time you were there. Not just that you paid for it, but that you know, it'll show that you were admitted. Once you're in the museum, you do what you want. That's 10 points. You can do each of these options 2 times. Okay, so 20 points, you could do that if there are 2 art museums open before the end of spring semester. Okay, that's number 1. All right, moving on, if you want to follow on the page. Sorry, question?
Yeah, does the virtual tours count for the credit?
That is a good question. And no, I'm amazed. No one's asked that before, or have I thought of it until tonight? I'd rather hold off because there's a different, see, we're doing this virtual thing already. Plus your textbooks, many of them, almost all of you, right, are going to use. I kind of think, I know this is going to make me sound old school, but I don't mind admitting to that obvious fact. I think it's important that you see art in real world terms, in face-to-face with the actual original works of art. But there is one exception. And you're going to say, what? I'm going back to what I just said. Does anybody know about there is one called Immersive Van Gogh? Now that might be the first thing that opens in the spring. It's Van Gogh paintings projected 360 degrees around you as you walk through different rooms in the gallery. I think it's going to be at the Young. I'm not sure. It might be at Museum of Modern Art. It's one of the San Francisco museums. Now that's iffy, you know, like everything else. But the point is that I think you want to see, with that exception, of course, you'd be in a museum looking at images of his art. But in general, I think I want to stick to actually seeing the work of art. Now, I may change my mind at some point if the museums are clearly, none of them are going to open before the end of May. But I think at least a couple of like the Sonoma County Art Museum, it's a good one. If you haven't been there, it's on 4th Street, downtown Santa Rosa. And there's the Petaluma Historical Museum. There are things in there that qualify as art, of course. There are paintings and engravings and different images from, you know, the history of Sonoma County. And that's in Petaluma, just behind McNair's, is it? Yeah, well, you can find it. Petaluma Historical Society. So there are plenty of museums around. I think at least a couple will be open. So I prefer you to go in person. Okay, number 2, going to an architectural site. I've changed this. I used to say you had to go inside and give me 3 photos of the interior. Obviously, that isn't likely to be feasible. So 4 photos of the exterior. Okay, that would indicate very simple varieties of angles or details. Actually, that'd be maybe one view of the entire building exterior and a couple of, 3 other details. Please have them in a PDF format or mail them to me. You can do it either way, in color, please. And all you have to write is your name, the class, don't forget what section you're in, and the name and city of the building. That's all. You don't have to get super detailed. Architecture is an underappreciated part of art history. I'll explain why I say that in a few minutes when we segue into what is art. But let's keep going on the rest of these email. Oh, I'm sorry, that's worth 10 points. So taking photos, it's pretty easy. You can do it with your camera. With your smartphone. Sorry, your camera on your smartphone. As long as there are 4 different views in color and you identify yourself, the class, and the building. Okay, number 3. Emailing me a PDF of articles on any visual art topic. I used to let you do endless numbers of these, but that's kind of so easy, right? Well, for most people it is, that I figure, okay, 20 points is the maximum, in other words, in each category. So you could do 4 articles if you want, okay? And that would be, it just says it right there. 5 points for each one you send me. They do have to be at least a page. They don't have to have a photo to go with them, or be 5 pages long. But if you give me just 140 words, in a paragraph, that's not an article. So at least 1 full page or longer about any visual art, any topic, and that can include. Oh, we got to admit. Wait a minute, one more person. That can include the art of a friend, a personal acquaintance. In other words, it could quite literally just be a straightforward, article from, well, it can't be web. It could be a website. Okay, fine. Yeah, it could be someone's own website. But that's kind of cheesy. It's better to have it be written by someone other than the artist that the article's about. And there's so much material online and easily accessible that you can then download, and if you didn't already know how to convert to a PDF, you're going to have to anyway for your papers, or a screenshot, but a screenshot isn't always accessible. So to be safe, you should submit your extra credit also as a PDF. And so I can open it and say, okay, there's an article about painting or sculpture, or ancient Egyptian tombs, which there is one right out there right now. You can go find it. I just saw it on my AOL account yesterday, so I'm sure you can find one of those. They're all the time. There are new articles about new discoveries in ancient cities as well as modern art. Okay, so each time you do that 5 points, you can do maximum 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, watching, this is a new one I created only since the pandemic. Watching a feature film or documentary of at least 60 minutes about the career, I should have said, and life, or life, of any visual artist. Okay, and that is, again, your choice. The movie Frida, some of you've seen it. It's excellent. Speaking of her, it has a kind of a sad undercurrent because she had a difficult life. You all know about that. I'm sure I don't have to go into what happened to her when she was 18 and with her husband cheating on her with her sister. She painted scenes of each of those tragic moments in her life, but she also painted some uplifting and all very political stuff. So, for instance, you could watch that movie Frida. There's another, I think, new movie about Van Gogh, but there's been about a dozen about his life. So it should be easy to find. I'm going to give you a tip. The best movie about his life ever made, the man just passed away at 104 who played him, Kirk Douglas. What? If you know who he is, you might think, well, he can only do Roman gladiators, right? Spartacus, right? It's what made him famous. He won the Academy Award for that in 60 or something, even before I remembered. So the movie he did where he portrayed Van Gogh, and everyone in it but him won the Academy Award, and the movie did for best film, was Lust for Life. What a title, Lust for Life. That's a phrase Van Gogh used in his letters about his own painting. So that's a movie you would enjoy, I think, if you like Van Gogh's art. And who doesn't? Well, some people maybe. So I don't think I need to, give you more examples. You can all find a movie. 60 minutes or more is a reasonable minimum because documentaries are often 1 hour or more. So you just write a 2-page essay about what you learned about that artist, their life, and their work from that, and that's 10 points. You could do that twice. Now, a walking tour of architecture, I doubt it. We probably won't have one. But when we do, we usually get a big turnout of 25, 30 people, and we go inside historic homes. And I'm going to segue in just a minute to how that relates to my qualification to teach a class. And then we'll do a brief or a somewhat brief discussion. Whoops. Somebody's doing a DJ impersonation. Anyway, the point is having the option of, if it comes up before the end of class, I doubt I'll be doing a lecture anywhere off campus. But if I did, that's worth 15 points. And then the last option is the most valuable point-wise. And I want to make sure you know this, everyone. I had these 2 novels that are on Amazon Kindle that I wrote years ago, not just to make this class, more, easier for you to get extra credit or to promote the books themselves. I wrote them many years ago, and they were well received. Then they're now on Amazon Kindle, and they're both art related. I had them vetted, that phrase, vetted by the academic senate, the dean, and the vice president of Santa Rosa JC. So what that means is they want to make sure they were appropriate, right, in every sense of that word, and relevant. And therefore, I have the permission to offer. Now, somebody's making some. I wish they would sit down and join me. Yeah, well, that happens almost every semester, at least once or twice.
Hey, do you change a Word document into a PDF through the Save As thing?
Yes, you can
Okay.
if you have that app downloaded, and I understand it's either free or very inexpensive, but there are come-on versions that want you to pay 20 bucks a month. So
You
be
can
careful.
also-
Yes, you can. I know you can.
Yeah.
'Cause,
As-
my readers do it all the time, but I don't know how. I know you have that option, most of you, or you might have to download. I forgot the name of it. Adobe, isn't it Adobe? I think it
If
is.
you go to print it, you can print it as a PDF. It will just save it as a PDF, just through the little.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
Yeah, that's a prerequisite. Again, I didn't set. That's the colleges. Okay, so let's wrap up the thing. What are those 2 novels? Well, here are the titles, and you can read. There are dozens and dozens of reviews of both of them on Amazon Kindle, but of course you'd have to enter both the title and my name as the author. South Side Story, a novel of Chicago in the early 60s. I'll keep it brief because we want to move on to all the topics about art tonight and the slides after the break. That has some relevance because when I grew up, as some of you may know, this is Obama's old neighborhood. When Obama was a senator and was running for president, he lived in my neighborhood where I was born and raised. Hyde Park, South Side, Chicago. Some of you may know that's not exactly let's say, a cream puff environment to grow up in. You learn things about the reality of the world, and you can't not notice the problems of racism. And of course, prejudice against immigrants, and the Cold War, which most of you don't even remember because you weren't alive, but it was pretty serious. We thought we were going to die in 1962. I'm old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Literally, we thought any minute the Russian missiles were going to come over each big city, including Chicago, of course, would have been one of the main targets. So there are a lot of, and then there are all kinds of the panic that resulted from that. That is very similar to the panic about buying toilet paper and everything else back in April. Hopefully that's not still happening where you guys live. The stores in Berkeley don't have any shortages at the moment. I mean, some of the same things that everyone in your generation is dealing with have happened before. I'm sure you've heard that. But that's what this is about, what it would be like to grow up in that period. And my parents were both artists, quite accomplished artists. And we starved. They say starving artists. So I know what that's like, because you don't have a regular income and you've got a family with 6 people to raise, as my dad did. So that's what that's about. And the other one is a murder mystery. And you would say, what? How does that have anything to do with art? That's called The Open House Murders, an offbeat San Francisco thriller. Every chapter in there, I made a point of having an architectural, historically interesting, rich with history and architectural detail site, which I described, where the main character who's being framed by the Russian mafia. Okay, again, relevant. Some of you know the Russian mafia is certainly present in our country and in many others. And that's who they probably tried to kill, Alexei Navalny. I don't believe he went back to Russia, but my daughter's adopted, by the way. She's from Russia. And so she talks about these things all the time when she reads about things that are happening back in her homeland. Anyway, the point is there are all kinds of, colorful characters, and based on my years as a real estate agent, haven't done that work in over 20 years, but I was a full-time realtor before I became a professor. And so there are things in there that you'd find interesting, but also, if nothing else, they give you an idea for sites to go photograph for the architecture option of the other extra credit option. Okay, so anyway, a day in the life. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you. A day in the life of Andy Warhol. Yeah, I remember seeing that. I lived at Hyde Park, which, if you don't know, the University of Chicago, South Side. Yeah.
Yep,
Oh,
I know where that is.
Okay, then Oak Lawn is right next door. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely a place where you encounter all the varieties of kinds of lifestyles and people and environments that there are in the world, practically, except deserts and rainforests. But I'm talking about, urban environments. Yeah, it's definitely not one of those suburban, monodimensional. I lived in that kind of environment. Thousand Oaks. We know where that is? Yeah. I went to high school. It's the only time in my life I lived in a place where I felt like a fish out of water. I did not like it. Everyone looked alike. I said, what? This isn't the real world. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, well, it is in some limited way. All right. Enough about that. My only other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to see me walk away from the screen here for a minute, is to show you a little bit, and then we'll get to a brief discussion of what is art. These are the 3 books I've written, which are on architecture, and they are all on reserve at your libraries. But of course, I think you'd have to go. They're not digital. Well, maybe they are by now. I don't know. My publisher doesn't explain that if they do. They are on architecture. This one is the first green architect. If you don't know his work, or his name, one thing he did, which I guarantee some of you have been to, the Palace of Fine Arts. That's a good architecture option for you to go to and take photographs of. So I'm going to show you, most of you know it from probably just movies, if nothing else. Here we go. This site in San Francisco, where the lagoon around was built for the 1915 World's Fair. That's an easy option for architectural extra credit option. And then you're in the city, San Francisco. If you go there, which hopefully you certainly should be able to do that before the end, with a mask and keeping your distance. You can find a second site, to take photos of, or maybe when the museums, if they do reopen. This is my favorite book I ever did, though. It's on the first woman architect in American history. She did Hearst Castle. And that's what that photo is of one of the 2, the indoor pool at Hearst Castle. Has anyone here been to Hearst Castle?
Yes.
If you have photographs of Hearst Castle, there's an exception. My normal rule is you have to attend or take photos of a building during the semester to get that option. But I'll accept extra credit from a previous period of time prior to this class. If you have your own photos of Hearst Castle, send me 4 photos of it, and I'll give you the 10 points extra credit. There are 4 of her houses in Santa Rosa, and I'll probably just go ahead and send you an email. I think I'll do that for all my students.
Could you repeat the name, please?
Pardon?
Could you repeat the name?
Yeah, Julia Morgan. Are you talking about Hearst Castle or the architect? She was the first woman ever to practice on her own. Women weren't allowed to even go to architecture school. This is in 1900. And she finally got the first woman. This is almost a crime, embarrassment. The American Institute of Architects, the premier group that almost every architect in American history since the 1850s, when they opened that organization, belongs to, didn't give a single woman architect, and she was the first, of course. But there have been dozens each year that are famous, that are well known. And now about a third of all architects are women. I don't know if you knew that. I'm working on a new book about the first women architects of the West Coast. Hopefully it'll be out by this time next year with a different publisher. Bottom line is her work is all over the West Coast. She did more buildings than Frank Lloyd Wright, and you probably never heard of her unless you went to Hearst Castle and the tour guide knew what they were talking about. A lot of them don't. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, for the architecture thing, does it have to be like a large building, or can it be like a because like in Petaluma there's a lot of heritage homes and old architecture.
No, that's fine.
For like houses and stuff.
Oh yes, absolutely. I meant to say that any building except maybe a Costco warehouse, or one of those tiny homes, that are, basically trailers or whatever. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It doesn't have to be historic, but that's the easiest kind, because then you're going to have plenty of details that you can take 4 different views of. Okay. And then the last one, this is the one that no surprise is doing the best. It's in its 4th printing. So I'm not making a lot if you're curious. We get about it. Me and the photographer, I think I get $1.50 and he gets $1 for each book that's sold. So it's had a few thousand printings, maybe 10,000. Frank Lloyd Wright on the West Coast. That house has been in several movies. It's in Carmel. It's beautiful. If you ever get down to Carmel before the end of the semester, there'd be an easy one to photograph. It's right on the beach. Oh, everyone down there knows where it is. It's been in a bunch of movies that were made even as recently as, I believe, the 90s. And so, those books are what I focused on when I was to get my degrees, not the books, but I mean the subject matter. And then the books came out of all the research I'd done when I was a student. I did my master's thesis at Cal State East Bay. So, I don't have a PhD, confession, but I have 2 postgraduate degrees and 1 undergraduate, a BA in history at UC Berkeley. And then we used to say that and 50 cents will get you a ride on BART. That's how much the BART tickets were when it opened a long time ago. And then the other 2 degrees are a fine and applied arts lifetime credential and also teaching credential from UC Berkeley, and then a master's from Cal State East Bay. It was Hayward then. And on that, I did my thesis about those 2 first architects. The woman, Julia Morgan, who was, guess what, the best student of Maybeck's, and he being the first green architect in American history. He was talking about green, environmentally sensitive design in the 1890s when she was a student. And he's the one that told her, you can be an architect. In fact, you'll be one of the best. And she was. She did 700 buildings. Frank Lloyd Wright only did 520. She outdid him in output. And most people have never heard of her. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background. So time-wise, we've got just about the right amount of time before we take a break. I wanted to ask you guys to do, so maybe now you should do this so I don't forget or have to rush through this. The mini bios, here's what I suggest you should do. Request, I'm sorry, not suggest. 3 at most, a half a page, maybe 2 or 3 short paragraphs. Here are the 3 things you should have in your PDFs, and please make them a PDF too. Those you can send to either the Santa Rosa JC or Mark W at AOL email address, because they're pretty straightforward and easy to see. But don't forget to write art. Please make sure you label them art 1.1 mini bio, and your name, of course, will show up on the tagline. Anyway, the point is that I just want you to tell me 3 things. Where you have lived and traveled in your life. Not if you've been to dozens of countries, just keep it simple to the main, most interesting places. Many of you are from other parts of the world and moved here, or have traveled, lived, or worked other places. If it's just different parts of California, that's fine. Just mention the ones that you think are the most interesting. That should just be, like 2 sentences, maybe 3. Then the second thing would be your work experience, if any. And if you haven't worked at a paying job, but you've done some kind of creative endeavor of artistic type, creating sculpture, painting, mention that. But then that kind of segues into the third part, which is what is your experience with art? So let's keep those two separate. Let's just say the second part of it should, again, there should only be 3 or 4 sentences at most for each section. And 1 or 2 is enough. A paragraph, half a page is adequate. So this, I'll say it again. The first one is, where you've lived and worked. The second one is your actual work experience, or if you're a student, then just describe what it is you're studying. If you're focused entirely on your education, that's fine. That could go into the second part. And then I'll send you an email about this too. The third would be your experience with art, whatever it is, whether you're just interested in, you had parents who are artists, you're creative, you created art, or you've, studied art, whatever, in some way, what you might want to learn about art in this class. You could add that if you don't have to, but that would be your last sentence. Like I'd like to know more about the ancient Egyptians, or whatever, the Romans, or ancient China or Japan, which, as we cover. I'm not going to review the syllabus, right? I don't think we need to do that. I do want to have a brief, now it'll be down to just about 20 minutes, discussion of what is art. Well, there's actually a chapter in Stockstead, unless she's changed a new edition. I haven't seen any of the, you can, by the way, you can use an older edition of Stockstead, but don't make it too much older than, let's say, 2006 at the, it'd be better if it's after 2008. They used to republish, make minor changes and raise the price every year or two, but they don't send us instructors free copies anymore. We used to get, so I don't know what the newest edition looks like, except that it covers the same topics. I checked on their website, the publisher's website. Okay, so there are topics in every art history textbook, usually somewhere in the beginning where I say, well, what is art and what isn't? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about an exhibit in New York City. And if you care to comment, that's partly why I hope to engender your reactions. It was in 2000s. Well, yeah, it opened in 99, that far back. And I think it ran through late 2000. It was called Sensation. You could look this up. It was an exhibit that came out of London. And that exhibit had works of art that were so controversial. Now, this is going to make some of you laugh, I hope. If you've been following the craziness since the election, I'm not going to get partisan. That's not appropriate in art history class. Whew. But anyway, you know what Giuliani's been doing, right? He was mayor of New York then. And at that point, he was sort of like, just very competent. He was a good mayor. There's no denying that. He was the mayor in 9/11, and he helped the city, through that. No question that was, part of his legacy until recently. People thought of him that way. So he was mayor of New York City when the exhibit opened. And as a devout, practicing Catholic and Republican mayor, he decided that he didn't like 2 of the exhibits, or the works of art, that were in this exhibit. One of them was called, the press gave them nicknames. So I'm not giving you the exact titles the artist gave them, but you could look this up. It'd be easy. Black Madonna was the nickname. It was a painting by a Nigerian artist, who had been raised in London, but he was born in Nigeria. And it was of Madonna, the mother of Jesus, according to the Bible, right? But not the fact that she was dressed in African clothing and obviously an African woman. That wasn't the issue, not in New York City in 2000. That wasn't, might have been 30, 40 years earlier. Depicting her that way wasn't controversial. What is that she had dried elephant dung, clumps of dried elephant dung glued to her blue royal robes that Mary's supposed to wear. She's supposed to be, according to, again, some teaching of the Bible, the Queen of Heaven, since she went up to heaven after she died, according to that. So he, as a Catholic, got very incensed by that. He said it was insulting. Roughly 1 out of 3 New Yorkers are Catholic. Out of 8 or 9 million people, that's a large number of people. He didn't poll them or ask them, but he just was saying, he was speaking for the, and then he also said, even if you're not, you should be offended, even if you're not even Christian, because it's insulting a holy figure from a major world religion, right? Well, guess what? He didn't do his homework. So here on that one, that controversy almost resolved itself, because the artist flew in to New York, and I think he gave a press conference or maybe just released a statement saying that Giuliani was criticizing him for something that he never intended. He not only wasn't showing disrespect, he was himself born and raised Catholic, because half of Nigeria is Christian, the other half is Muslim. And so he decided to use the elephant dung because it is, and it was verified by independent researchers or press, that in Nigeria, in the folk culture of his country, elephant dung is a symbol of regeneration, of the cycle of life, of birth and death and I mean, it may seem like a stretch, but it makes sense if you get, biologically organic about it. So he was able to verify that he had not only not meant any disrespect by putting, dried elephant dung, but that it was a traditional gesture of actual respect, because she supposedly is symbolic of the ability to have a life after this, according again, of course, to the teachings of the Bible and her son, right, Jesus. Okay, so he kind of had to back off, but the one that he really pushed was child molester. That was the title. And being a parent, any of you who either have been older siblings or have, younger family members, or if you're parents yourself, I know some of you must be or plan to be, this should hit a nerve with you. It was a portrait of a woman who had been not only convicted of, but confessed openly to having murdered and tortured to death and sexually abused several young children throughout Great Britain up before until that exhibit. And this woman had not only confessed, they don't have capital punishment, she'd been sentenced to life in prison, but the portrait of her that this artist chose to convey in his work was made up of dozens of little pixeled images of photos of murdered children throughout the last 50 years in Great Britain. And that bothered more than just, whatever, conservative or whatever you want to say, traditionalist type audience, because the children in that neighborhood, they had a K through, I think 8 there, right, school. In any case, the younger kids, like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, were being taken into the museum because there was no age. The bottom line is the museum didn't restrict anybody from seeing any of the exhibits in that museum of the works of art. I mean, in that exhibit. There was no age restriction, no warnings, no nothing. So kids, older kids, sometimes even the siblings of younger kids, just to be mean to their younger brothers and sisters, would take them in and say, see that guy up there? Or that way, it actually was a woman. People thought it was a man, but it was actually a female who is convicted of these crimes, this child molester. She did this and this and this to these kids. And if you, aren't good tonight, or you don't give me your allowance or whatever, you're going to have the same, so kids were coming home traumatized and parents were complaining, and the museum was getting protesters outside. And so Giuliani said, take that work of art out or I will remove your city funding. And the museum was like half, maybe it's a third to half funded by the city, the rest privately. So that would have made them close their doors for months out of the year. So guess what? A lawsuit happened. And then if you have any reaction as to whether the artist was justified, or does this amount to censorship, what Giuliani tried to do. He tried to get them to remove a single work of art that he felt he had solid reason to object to. And a lot of people in New York agreed with him on that. So in the bottom line of what happened was that museum took him to court because he was threatening them after the fact. And they said to him, come on, Mayor, you could have attended or said someone from your office to all of the open hearings that we have every month about the upcoming exhibits. And you would have been told what was going to come into, of course, you wouldn't have seen the art, but you would have heard what it was about. And you could have objected then. And to do it now is censorship. So the museum said, back off. And guess who sided with the museum? Hillary Clinton. She was running against Giuliani for the Senate seat in New York, which of course she won, as some of you know. So the bottom line is he was forced by the state Supreme Court of New York, after all of the threats and counter threats. They ruled the following. I think they got it right, but they said, first of all, to Giuliani, back off. That is censorship. That is impinging on the museum's freedom of expression. It's unconstitutional. And as a mayor, or even if you were president, you wouldn't have the right to tell a museum to get rid of one or any individual works of art that you just don't happen to like because you think they're offensive. That is censorship. But then they turn around to the museum and they said, however, you have a responsibility and you haven't met it. You have to warn people and you'll have to have age restrictions. Anyone over the age of 18 in New York is legally an adult. So they were allowed, the museum, to keep the exhibit, not remove anything, and keep the access open. Even little kids could go, but they had to be accompanied by someone over 18. And they posted a security, museum docent, whatever, a guard, like every museum has at the entrance to the exhibit. And that, I think, was the right solution. Now, does anybody have any thoughts about whether or not that artist was out of line to put those? How about here's the question I didn't address in my overview. What about using pictures of kids from families that are still alive? I mean, most of them were, if they were just.
Did the family give permission to use the
No,
children's photos?
no, none.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah,
Well, by
exactly.
definition, if consent wasn't granted, it's unethical to take someone's picture without their permission. So.
Oh, yes, you're right. Except guess what the artist's response was? Those are good points, very good points. He said, wait a minute, I just took these as images from the newspapers when the children went missing. He didn't show their mutilated bodies, but he did show the images of the children who were now dead and were found, their bodies were found.
But it's a different context.
He called it a public domain issue, which legally, at least, I think in the US, but certainly in Great Britain, he was technically on legal ground to do that. But is it right?
Just morally distasteful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the main difference is that I don't know about Britain, but at least in America, the difference is the parents most likely gave the permission for the newspaper to post them and hope the children will be found.
Good point. Sounds like you have some legal background.
There is a reason why for example, I cannot go and take a picture of the newspaper and then publish it on my own. That's plagiarism, and that's not allowed. They are the only people giving consent to use that picture, so it's still unethical for him to use it.
Well, then there must be something different because some of you, Meghan Markle, and her lawsuit, it's working its way through the British courts about her father's letter that was so personal, and that I don't know if you've been to London, but our newspapers have some controversial photos and things, but my God, you don't want to look through a British newspaper.
They have for their personal stories and their dramatic, people's problems that they just put in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
But they have
it's tabloid journalism on steroids.
Yeah.
It's well known for that. I don't think that's a good thing. Their libel laws are much looser than ours. So a lot of people can't get any kind of redress legally when they feel their privacy has been violated. Anyway, so at least under British law, somehow he was able to do that, and apparently but you know what can anybody guess what his explanation was for why he even created the work of art in the first place and thought it was okay to show it?
Like awareness or something?
Yeah, exactly. He said, I'm just holding up a mirror to society. I find that slightly disingenuous. And obviously he wanted the publicity and the PR. There's no bad publicity, as you've heard the phrase. And to some degree, that's true. So of course, that work of art, the wall it was on, actually, I think they had to take the wall or I don't know how they did that. Well, they do it with Banksy. Banksy, you know who I'm talking about, the British. Well, nobody knows who he really is, but that's the name he gives. Stencil artist, right? Graffiti/stencil artist. Usually it's just images without words, but occasionally I'll put a word. His work has been sold off the walls. I don't know exactly how they do that. So somehow that happened. This guy made over $500,000 from selling that image after the exhibit closed. So he got his successful result. But the parents of those kids, the 50, not to mention the ones that woman herself had just been convicted of killing, which were very raw and recent, they just had to suffer, I guess, and didn't have any redress. I find it objectionable. But the main thing is the museum should have thought of that. And they should have thought, as soon as they got complaints from the parents, they could easily have said, well, let's institute a reasonable control. But does anybody think that's censorship? Should any age of person off of the street be able to walk into any exhibit, including the most potentially offensive works of art, and not have any kind of limitation on what the museum can?
Would you let a 12-year-old child walk into a strip club?
Yeah, I was about to say, are there you guys are really on the ball here tonight. I was about to ask, and you beat me to it. Is there censorship that we accept? Well, yeah, there's an example. Anybody think of any other art forms where age restrictions are regularly applied? I think you all can.
Especially with children, it's a lot there's a lot of different laws surrounding that, because until you're 18, you're not like a full adult person citizen thing. So the laws are different. So I can understand with children censorship, but after the 18 mark, it gets way more into shady territory.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Good point. Yeah. I would just ask one more time because in about 3, 4 minutes we'll take our break. I do want to though ask if you guys, and you do, I know, if you think about it, many of you will think of. There's more than one. So maybe a handful of mediums. You understand the word medium, you guys? Because if you don't, then you should make a mental note of that. That's what type of art the art is conveyed.
Movies.
Right. Exactly. Since the 1980s, people have accepted that. Is that censorship? I mean, I wasn't allowed to see Psycho. Now it's pretty tame. If you haven't seen it, the shower scene, they wouldn't have let anyone.
Is this American Psycho?
Yeah. Yes. The Hitchcock, the original Psycho.
Oh, okay.
Not that one. No, the other one I know you're talking about. No, the original Psycho. It still kind of packs a punch, and my daughter loves, screaming at that scene, even though she's now in her teens and she knows it's coming. When she saw, we let her watch it when she was about 10. She asked, she kept bugging us. She heard about it at school or something. Anyway, the point is that yes, there's one medium. Any other mediums you can think of creative artistic works where there are age limits or censorship? There's more than a couple. Anybody
Music.
else? Yeah. Sorry, sounds like okay. Well, how about music? Aren't there limitations for certain types of lyrics that on a certain, at least there was the last time they've closed the music stores in Berkeley, by the way, as you may have guessed. I don't know about Sonoma County, right? CDs or whatever, any other, well, what else would there be, right? The physical.
They usually do like two versions.
Oh, that's it.
Version, and then
right.
What you buy at home type version, which is more.
And then also, anybody can think of something a lot of you like to do. I imagine you've done more since the pandemic when you're at home and you're not busy with assignments or work or pestered by
video games.
Yeah, isn't there a limit? That last time, I'm very proud to say this. Anybody seen any of the 3 Iron Man movies? Marvel.
All
Right.
3.
You have seen the work of my nephew, my oldest nephew. He did the special effects for the battle scenes, especially in, I think it was Iron Man 2, with, why am I forgetting it? The octopus, God, why am I forgetting his name? Oh, okay, that's terrible. Anyway, one of the, super villains that at the Monte Carlo race car scene, and it'll come to me during the break. Anyway,
Whiplash.
Say again?
Something or
Whiplash.
Yes, O'Rourke, Mickey O'Rourke.
Yeah. Mickey O'Rourke.
Not
Greasy guy.
O'Rourke. That's too Irish, but he is Irish. Yeah, Mickey O'Rourke, playing a Russian bad guy. Yeah, he did a great job in that movie. So they had to talk to the actors about, after they did, not before, of course, but the scenes had to then be, what's the word? Integrated with the special effects, of course. And he's done that kind of work. And guess what? He's one of the only people I know at Disney. Now it's Disney/Marvel, right? Of course, that still has his full-time job, and so does his wife. He met her there, and they got married right before the shutdown, late 2019. And then, of course, they're lucky in a way that their particular niche was such that out of 20 people in their department, all the other 18 were sent home. So they happened to still be working. The last I heard, he made not this, because they still got to make movies, right, with special effects, but just not, unfortunately, viewable yet for the foreseeable future in theaters. Anyway, I think you can see now I hope you can, from this discussion, that, one person's art is another person's pornography or another person's direct, a good Jewish word, stands for the word that begins with S and ends in T. I'm not Jewish, but many of my friends use that word to describe things they don't like. Anyway, the point is that, you have a subjective basis, all humans do, for evaluating what is and isn't great art. But I can tell you, in this class, what we're going to focus on as soon as we get to the break in like 1 or 2 minutes, 15 minutes though, don't make it 20, please, is works of art and or objects of historic importance that the whole world, what I just say, most people interested in the history of art, and that can include archaeologists, instructors, other artists, governments, the UN, which protects these sites, many of them anyway. So you have a consensus, not just of that country's artists or government in each of these places that we're going to see. These are works of art that people have for anywhere from from centuries to millennia, right? Multiple thousands of years have adjudged are so important that they're protected one way or another, either in a museum or at the site by the government, by the UN. It's called UNESCO. If you don't know that, you're going to hear that word. UNESCO, United Nations Cultural Organization, is the agency responsible for listing things that are like the Taj Mahal. We're going to see it in this class. Not, in great detail. I've never been there. It's one of the few places I've ever wanted to go that I never got to. Been to over 40 countries. And so you're going to see the actual photos of what they look like in several of the lectures after the slides from the syllabus are finished. Okay, so let's take our break. Okay. And I'm going to pause the recording, and 15 minutes from now should put us at 8:15. Assuming that, yeah, right, this is correct. Okay, so we'll see you at 8:15. Okay. We should be ready to start now, and it's recording, so that's why it's important, because I want you all to be able to, see this later. If you need to, for review, and of course you will need to for the exams. That's the good thing about this technology, is that you have that option, of course, when you do the review. Now I'm having trouble with it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, one more time. I'm going to try to get this off the screen. There we go. What? Now I've never seen it like this. Why it won't just get rid of these boxes. I've never had it do this before. This is a new one. Okay. There we go. You don't need to see me while I'm doing this. Okay, we are now going to go to the first slide that you need to take notes on. And we will not be able to finish too early tonight, maybe 5 minutes early if there aren't a lot of questions. But you have the right, as I've been saying all night, to ask any question at any time on any topic relating to the subject matter. Okay. All right. So this is the first of the must-know slides. Now, what does that mean? I have used that term for all the years of teaching art history. That means it's a slide from the syllabus that you might be tested on. But if you look down, you should all have your syllabus in front of you. And you should do that every night, of course, before the lecture starts, before the class starts. That where it says note, instructor reserves the right to remove a few slides from the list as we go, ongoing. But at the end of that section or segment, before each of the two exams, before the midterm and the final, I will remove at least 40% of the total slides from the study list. So you won't have to even look at those slides again before the test. In other words, every slide from the syllabus until you hear further noticed, if I remove it, assume it could be on the test. So take good notes. Okay. Here's the first must know for tonight. The Libyan Sybil. It's the second one down on the list. We're due to do all four, but they vary the sequence one semester to the next. Okay, so if you look at your syllabus, I'm not going to spell these words several times because they're on your syllabus, but I'll spell them once. The Libyan, the title is Sybil, and that's Libyan, a second word, Sybil. It's a type of figure from the Bible. Okay, Michelangelo, I think you can all spell that, right? It's on your syllabus. Michelangelo is the artist, and the date, 1512. By the way, on the exam, you don't have to know. Well, of course, you can look at your notes. It should be easy. The exact date. You can just give me the right decade. So you could write 1510s with an apostrophe S, or even just 1510, and I would accept that. So it's one less digit, if you can follow what I'm saying. The exact year isn't required, but the right decade for each of these slides that are on the test, when they will be. By the way, only 8 of them will actually appear on the midterm and another 8 on the final. Oh, and the final is not cumulative. So you don't have to go back, like I hated that at Berkeley. You see, history professors would make you go back to the very first week and study all the notes. It's completely separate. The midterm only covers the first half. The final is everything after the midterm. Okay. All right. Libyan Sybil, what is that? Well, let's start with the fact that here's how you should, I'm giving you very, very helpful advice that I hope you all follow for making it more efficient when you're going to study or look at your notes to write the essays answers on the midterm and final. This might be on the midterm, right? Okay, so how do you best take your notes? It's very straightforward to divide them into two categories. I always start with the meaning, so label them that way. Meaning. And this, what was the first thing you'll hear from me on each of these slides from the syllabus. I'll describe just a few minutes worth of information, facts about the meaning. You know, what is the artist trying to say with that work of art? Or who was that artist? I think you all know who Michelangelo was, right? But I will briefly mention something about him that some of you might not know. So in other words, you have two subheadings for all your notes for each slide. You should write meaning at the first, moment the slide's on the screen. You'll get that information from me. Then the second category, 2 words, formal analysis. Formal analysis. And that will be the composition techniques, which will be new to most of you unless you are already a practicing artist or took other art history. We're going to take our time and go slowly at the beginning. I'm not going to give you, a detailed description of every single technique of the artist on each slide at the beginning. And maybe in many cases, I only give you, several of them. So the notes, in other words, should be divided into those two subheadings. So let's go right now to the meaning of this work of art. Well, first of all, it's a fresco. And that leads to the only other handout you should have gotten and printed out and should have with you every night, each class. List of terms to know for Art 1.1. This will make it much easier for you when you're reviewing, or even just if you don't review and you just pull it out for writing your essay answers on the midterm and the final. These are in the order, these terms of which they're going to appear in this class. Okay, you see the first term, fresco, right? We start slow, I promise. This is a short definition of fresco, but some of you probably know what that is. A painting on wet plaster, period. That's it. I'll say it again. A fresco is a painting on wet plaster. Well, so what is this? It's a fresco on the ceiling of a chapel in Rome. Most of you have heard of it. You don't have to know the exact name, but I'll give it to you because it's part of the meaning. If it's on the exam, Sistine, Sistine. You don't have to worry about the spelling of that word. Any word that's not on a syllabus, you just have to get close when you write your answers or your papers. But if it's a word from the syllabus, for you to get credit, you do need to spell the name of the artist correct and title. Okay, so the Sistine Chapel is actually, if you're Catholic, you know this, if you've been to Rome, not technically in Rome, but that's getting too arcane. It's a small city within Rome called the Vatican, but you can ignore that. And I'll say it again. First fact about the meaning you should write is that this is a fresco on the ceiling of a chapel in, we'll say Rome because it's surrounded by Rome, right? Which is one, here's a second half of that sentence, comma, which is one of 18 scenes from the Bible, period. It's a scene from the Bible. And I think, next fact about the meaning now, you all know who Michelangelo was. Just say painted by Michelangelo then, right? It took him 4 years to complete all 18 panels. This is part of the meaning now, right? How it was created. The context, the setting of it. So if it's on the ceiling, you can guess he had to lie on his back on scaffolding for 4 years to finish all 18 panels. That's a pretty amazing feat. That's why this is so famous. You've all heard of it, I'm sure, if you've heard of any works of art from the Renaissance. And that's the third fact about the meaning I'll give you. What period and style is it? It's Renaissance art. Now, I didn't give you that as a definition because we're not covering Renaissance art except for this one slide in this class. So all I can say is that's a very advanced period, of great advancement in all the visual arts, architecture, sculpture, painting. New techniques were invented. We'll just keep it simple during that period. And Michelangelo, now this is a fact you definitely want to write about the meaning, was the greatest painter of the human body up until his time. Right? Now, how did he know how to do that? I'm going to pause and see, does anybody know what Michelangelo did as a young art student to understand how to paint the human body?
Didn't
I want to say it
he?
has something to do with cadavers.
Yes, it did.
Yeah,
You're right.
he like dissected a couple dudes.
Yes, several actually. They were mostly what they called paupers back then, homeless, sadly, who had no family. And so it wasn't going to cause anybody some, legal problems. But it was illegal. He actually was breaking the law. There were doctors that far, but there were hospitals then, but they were all for private, for pay hospitals. But there were doctors trained, and they would have been allowed to dissect bodies for obvious reasons. Art students weren't supposed to, but he did. He dissected cadavers is the right word. You can say just dead bodies if you prefer, or corpses if you want. Of course, fresh ones. And he did that. Why? Because he was a ghoul? No, because he needed to see how all the parts of the human body were connected. The, muscles to the bones, and the tendons, right, to the muscles, and the skin to all the above. And he did succeed, because let's take a close-up look here at this woman's back. Now, who is she? That's part of the meaning. That's the literal, it's called illustration aspect of the meaning. You don't have to know those types of terms for the different kinds of meaning, but you should be writing each of the facts I give you as I give them to you, of course. So another fact is that this is a scene from the Bible. I said that, but what scene? The woman is a Sybil, a fortune teller, some would say, but that makes it sound like, she was at a carnival show. It's somebody like a kind of an angel. It's not exactly an angel. It doesn't have to be. Just say a holy figure from the Bible.
Excuse me?
Yes? What?
I had a quick question. I didn't quite get the full the other part of the meaning that you said.
Well, I haven't
Can you
finished.
repeat that?
I haven't finished it. So yeah, you got that Michelangelo, the artist, dissected or cut up dead bodies, cadavers, to understand how the human body works and functions. And so that's why he was the greatest painter of the human anatomy, you could say, human body, up until his time. But I didn't get the second one, the next fact. There's more. The fact is that this is a scene from the Bible. Which scene is it? It's where a prophet, there's no other word for it. That's with a PH, not the kind that makes money on Wall Street. The kind that can tell the future. The female prophet is a Sybil. In the Bible, there are several of them, and they can tell you your future. And that's what she's doing. So let's go back down to full view. She's looking down on earth. She's up in heaven, right? To tell someone on earth.
Micah, do you mind muting your mic, please?
Pardon? Pardon? I couldn't hear your question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Sometimes, there's a little interference. I don't know if that's from my end or someone else. All right. Once again, this is a female prophet. That's prophet, a figure from the Bible who has the power to tell human beings the future. If God told her to do, which he just did, he must have heard a prayer, God, right? Supposedly. Here's everyone's prayer. I don't know if anybody saw that movie with Jim Carrey. How could you answer billions of prayers? Anyway, so somehow he could do that. And he said to the Sybil, tell that man or woman or person on earth what's going to happen to them, the future, their future. So that's what she's doing. She's got a book here. This is the last two facts about the meaning. She's carrying a giant book. Supposedly everyone's future is in one book. That's quite some book. It's called the Book of Prophecies. And you have to know that. Just say a book that helps her tell the future to people on earth. She's lifting that book of prophecies about people's lives off the shelf, literally, and reading them. Are you going to die? Maybe the person wants to know. They're going to battle in an army, invasion or something, or their son or daughter is sick. will my child survive? Will I be happy? It's life or death questions, not just, what was the lottery winning number? God wouldn't answer that question. So it's life or death questions you might ask by usually through prayer of God. That if he chose to, he'd tell this woman, this, supernatural woman, of course, holy figure, a Sybil, to answer your prayer. So that's pretty much the whole meaning right there. There's one more fact. See this little baby here? That's and this, I told you we'd start short, another very short definition. So there's only 2 for tonight. Most nights we'll have 4, sometimes 5 in a whole lecture. Cherub, you see it's the second term on your list of terms to know. I've heard people say cherub. You can say it either way. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it. Here we go. It's very short. Cherub is a baby angel, often found in Renaissance art. They were very popular Renaissance paintings. Michelangelo painted them a lot. So did Da Vinci. Yeah. So that's what he is. But look what he's doing. There's 2 theories. So just say that the last fact now on the meaning, and then we'll switch to the composition. But before we leave the meaning, that there is a cherub who is the assistant, you could say a companion or sidekick, if you want to use those words, that's fine, of this Sybil. And he's not helping her. It looks like he's looking at himself in a mirror. They had mirrors in the Renaissance. They had mirrors back in ancient Egypt even. So maybe, or it's another Sybil that he's whispering to. We don't know. In any case, he's playing around. He's not helping her, is he? He should be helping her lift the book or doing something else to help his, mistress, master, whatever you want to call her. She was, of course, the superior creature. He's just a baby angel. He's a cherub, but he's just ignoring her. But that's a little humor. I think it's deliberate humor by Michelangelo, but it might not be. It might be just, that's the way they show cherubs. But I've seen paintings with baby angels where they're actually helping the humans or the other sacred creatures, angels or whatever, that are in the rest of the painting. So here he's not doing anything to help. He should be, because he's her assistant.
It looks like he's like looking over his shoulder and just like talking to another one, like, look what she's doing.
I think so. Yeah, that's more.
And he's like pointing. He's not really.
Yeah, I think he is.
It's like he's gossiping.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good way to put it. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, question, because we're going to move on to the formal analysis. Go ahead.
Oh no, it was just an observation, just to continue on that. But it looks like the cherub that's what it's called, cherub.
What?
It looks like the cherub. That's what it's called, correct? Just want to make sure. Pronunciation right. Yeah, it looks like it's. Well, from what I understand, Michelangelo kind of mocked biblical figures often as art, if I recall correctly.
Right.
So it kind of looks like that. It's almost pointing, making fun of her, kind of like what a child would do to her when making an observation.
Right. Well, that's what the other student said. I think you're both right. Yeah, I see it that way.
Sorry.
I used to think it was a mirror, and he was admiring himself in the mirror. It's unlikely now that we think about it, because the wall behind him looks like it's stone. But marble, you can see your reflection in marble. If you've ever done that, I have. In Rome, marble is everywhere, right? So, but it's probably what you both just the last 2 people said. Okay, so let's move on, because we do have 3 other slides. So we're going to do 3 elements of composition, and that's called formal analysis. So you should already be writing or have written. That is your second subheading for this slide, okay? So here we go. What do you notice first about her body, the way she's posed? Anything about, I'm giving you a hint with the cursor.
She's contorted?
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
She's
contorted.
twisted.
You could write it that way. She's twisted or contorted or turning. Any of those words will do.
There's some foreshortening.
Yeah, say it again. Say that again.
Foreshortening, like on her arms and her torso.
Oh, you're getting to another technique. So you guys are really on the ball tonight, and that's a good point. We'll get to that in a little bit, but let's focus on the posing of her body as it's shown in this painting. There are lots of curves. Her body isn't straight up and down, like standing stiff or sitting upright, right? Looking straight at the viewer. That would be very different. So here's how to write that. Here's the first, and we'll just do 3 at a time for the first couple of lectures on each of the slides from the syllabus, and then we'll get to where we'll do more of the techniques. They're called formal elements that the artist could use. This is called, when you see any object, whether it's a person or animal or an animate object, any object in a painting that has a lot of curved or diagonal lines, it's called dynamic. Just like the word sounds, I don't need to spell that for you guys. Dynamic. She is posed as a dynamic figure because there's no straight up and down lines to her pose or to the way her body is positioned. So he does that to show her being in movement. Dynamic implies that there's motion involved. All the way down to look at this toe. Some people say it's the largest toe ever painted in the history of art. It's pretty big. So everything from her toe, actually both her feet, you could just say, up through her legs and through her, waist and up through her arms, it's all dynamic. So what's the opposite? Let me, yeah. The opposite of dynamic, which is anything with 2 or more curved or diagonal lines in a visual work of art, whether it be a photograph, a painting, a drawing, a building, or a sculpture, anything that has 2 or more curved or diagonal lines or a combination of them is dynamic. She's dynamic. The cherub is dynamic. What's stable? Really only the box she's resting that huge toe on, just that box. That's got the opposite of dynamic is what? Something which is composed of straight lines or right angles. And you can see the box is stable. There are no curved lines here. So there's already the first, I hope it's clear to everyone, of the 9 elements that you'll need to understand in order to write your papers. I won't ask you to come up with all 9 on the slides on the exam because it's a 1-hour exam. Well, it isn't even that. It's whatever time you take, because you have 2 days after the exam has been shown on the computers to have it posted, and you get plenty of time to look at them again. But the point is, you should be able to describe by the end of the 6th week when you write your papers all these elements. We're only going to do 3 though for now on this slide. Okay, so the first one is to ask yourself, in any work of art that you're writing about in this class, is it stable or dynamic? Oh, this is like this almost 100%. This whole painting is almost all dynamic, isn't it? You could make the case that the edges of these 2 bas-relief panels, don't ask me what that word means. We're going to define it next week. These panels here, raised figures here, these look like more cherubs, but they're stone, not real, right? And so that maybe the borders around those sculpted panels could be in the very top. So there's some stable lines, but it looked mostly, even the book is dynamic because it's a diagonals, 2 diagonal lines. So this is like overwhelmingly a dynamic work of art because of all the curved lines. Okay, what about the color of her dress? Do you notice something about what how would you describe that?
It's using brighter colors such as gold, white, and almost like an autumn orange.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. You hit the nail on the head. These colors, when you see bright colors, there's a more correct term that you need to use in this class. I mean, they are bright, but the word is earth tones or warm. The right word to say it. Warm colors are, you named a couple of them, pink, gold, orange, red. I'm going to have a handout. Like I said, you'll have it in your inbox to print out for next class, and we'll go over each one of them in detail before we do the slide lecture part. That'll be the whole first half of the class next week. You don't want to miss that lecture because it'll help you with everything after that. Okay, so these colors, her skin tones, kind of a European pink flesh tone, I guess you can call it. And then you have the orangish, I call it kind of goldish orange. And you have the salmon, maybe salmon or pinkish, other tones of pink. And the same thing with the cherub and both of their hair. Those are all warm tones. They're colors that come from living things or from the earth. And there's a list of them. I don't want to give you that whole list now. It'll be in the handout you'll get in your inboxes by email by the weekend. And then again, you'll have it with you next week. So just say the colors on her dress and the skin tones of both figures are warm or earth tones. The other colors of her undergarment here, right, around her lower legs, and the wall behind them, those are the opposite of warm colors, which you might guess are called cool colors. Cool colors are like gray, blue, and certain shades of green. And it was a shorter list of cool colors. There's not as many as there are warm colors. Why would an artist do that? You don't have to write this now, but you should have written that the colors in here are a mixture of warm and cool. Warm on her skin and her clothing, or most of her dress, and cool on the background. That's good enough. That'd be all you have to write if this is on the exam, because of the cool grays and greens in the background and the warm orange, pink, and skin tones on her dress and body. Okay, but why would he do that? Because warm tones, earth tones or warm tones, appear to advance in our eyesight. We notice them first, human beings with, again, of course, we just had that point, as some students know. I have, like I said, I have a cousin who's colorblind, so I totally understand that. But if you have normal, color vision, you will notice warm colors first. And they are why the artist would use them. He wants you to look at her first, and that her body is twisting and she's getting ready to turn around in heaven there and give the future to someone. And then he also wants you to notice, I think it is deliberately humorous about the baby angel, either mocking or laughing at her. So then you see his warm skin tones. And last, you would notice the background behind them, because it's not important. So any object that's really more important than anything else in a painting, an artist wants to emphasize, they'll use warm colors on it. And then the last thing I'll say is about her arm. I'm going to do this we're running short on time, so I'm going to start speeding it up a little bit here. Do you notice the outline? It's called line as outline. Around her body is bold, like the word bold. About both human, well, I'm sorry, both figures. They're not human, right? Superhuman. The cherub and the Sybil are outlined with bold lines. That is a new technique. He invented that technique, Michelangelo, and so you could even add that as part of the meaning, or now in the form of analysis. The line is around the outer edges of the living, call them figures. All of his paintings are bold, by comparison with previous painters, we're saying, of course. And it became the normal technique for artists after his time, or at least many of them. So he created the concept of bold outlines, and he did that to make the figures stand out from the background. Okay, we're going to move on to, I'm pretty sure it's at the end. We're going to come back. Oh yeah, there we go. Whoa. We'll see one Van Gogh tonight, but before we get to that, there. This is the next must know. Okay, the title, I always start with that, is Laocoon. It's actually number 1, the top of your list under week 1. Laocoon, or some say Laocoon, Laocoon. Laocoon and his sons, plural, of course, there's 2 of them. The artist, we know, the sculptor's name was Polydorus. Polydorus, Polydorus. And then the date, you don't have to put the little c. I'm a historian, so I do if that's what's in the records. But we don't know the exact year. So circa means about 100 BC. You could just write 100 BC. We don't know the exact year. If you know any of your ancient history, some of you probably already know this. Wait a minute. Polydorus, that's a Greek name. Yes, the original sculpture was created by a Greek who was long dead by 100 BC. So how could that be? Here's the first fact, and remember to start out with meaning. This is a Roman copy of a much earlier Greek sculpture by one of the greatest of all Greek sculptors from ancient, of course, we're talking about ancient Greece, obviously not modern Greece. His name was Polydorus. The Romans loved, many of you know this, loved Greek art and Greek literature, Greek philosophy, even Greek religion. They adopted all the Greek gods. You probably know that. So some of you know that. So just say it this way, that this is a later Roman copy of an earlier Greek original by one of the great early, or just say ancient Greek sculptors. And you know his name. That doesn't tell us what's going on though. So who was Laocoon? Well, this is the guy here. He was another kind of prophet, but a human one, a human prophet, someone on earth who the gods gave the power to tell the future to. Okay, so he went to warn the Trojans not to accept the wooden horse. Some of you know the story. I hope all of you have heard it. But if you don't, I can't get too detailed because we don't have a lot of time here. I'll just say, you may know that there was a war between Greece and Troy, right? There's even a movie called Troy with, right? Angelina Jolie's ex. Anyway, right? It was actually pretty good about this period. So just say it this way to keep it simple: that this depicts a scene near the end of the Trojan War, in which the Greeks had left a wooden horse with their soldiers hidden inside on the beach outside the city walls. Okay, I'll say it again. The Greeks had left a giant wooden horse with their soldiers hidden in it on the beach. And before the Trojans were about to take that, they thought it was a gift, right? A parting gift. In that wooden horse inn, this guy came up the beach, Lekon, there he is, to warn them. And the Greek god sided with, guess which army? The Greeks, of course, and wanted them to succeed in this ruse, this plan to secretly invade the city through the horse. So that guy, Laocoon, was crushed to death by a sea serpent, as were both his sons who were with him at the time. It's tragic, right? That's what happens if you defy the Greek gods. They get very nasty. So he's supposedly being crushed by a sea serpent that the god of the sea, the ancient Greek god, you have to know his name, so Poseidon, sent from the water, because Troy's on the water. By the way, that war really happened. And there's even evidence of burnt wooden shards. It might have been from a giant wooden horse inside the city walls. They found that city. Used to think it was a myth. When I was a kid, there was, oh, that's just a story. It's just a fairy tale. But it turns out there was such a thing. Now, was there a giant sea serpent? Well, that might be a myth. In any case, it's a story the Greeks told each other about how they managed to fool the Trojans. He crushed the Greek god of the sea, crushed this man to death by sending a giant sea serpent to kill him and his sons, to silence him. That's the whole story. That's the meaning. Okay. What about the formal analysis? Well, when it comes to the pose, I think you can see there's nothing stable except the steps. These, well, you could just say it's really the base, these three levels. The base is pretty much, those are straight lines, aren't they? But everything else, the three human figures and the serpent, are all curved lines. So it's dynamic. And then we have the color. It's a cool color. White is a cool color. Since there is no warm color, it's just because the material is itself white marble. Marble can be, right, all kinds of colors. But this is a typical Greek sculpture and later Roman copy is going to be usually a white marble. And then we have the face. Let's go up to his face here. You see his agony, physical and emotional pain. He knew he was causing not his own death, but his two sons' death. And it was because he defied the gods, which he should have known better. So he's in agony emotionally and physically. How is he portrayed that way? All the detail of his eyes and his nose and his hair, that's what you call carved line. Now, we talked about a line, painted line in the last slide, right, of Michelangelo. That's painted bold outlines. Here, it's sculpture. There's no outlines, right? So it's all carved line is used to create what? Here's another technique called texture, simulated textures of hair, of skin, and I guess to some degree the clothing, what they're really not. Oh yeah, and the sea serpent's face. So all of their faces, including the serpent, and even the muscles on the body are created to look like the real human features with carved line, which then leads to another technique that the artist used, realistic simulated, because they're not real, it's all marble, right? Simulated textures of skin and hair and cloth. These are supposed to be cloth robes that they're not wearing. Kind of odd why they even have them there. But anyway, so there's three textures here, and they're all, you could say fake or phony, but the right word is sim with an S-I, simulated. And they are created by the artist using carved line, yeah, chisel, of course, on the stone. Okay, let's move on to another one. I have to go the other way for this. Oh, first you have to get it smaller. We're doing pretty well on time. Anybody have any other questions? You can feel free to. I think the next one is, oh, it's a Van Gogh. Oh, yeah, this one I think you're going to find interesting if you don't already know it. There we go. Okay, so what do we see here? This is the next must know. And this one, there's some, I think you'll be surprised, some myths, two myths, false stories about Van Gogh that have been repeated for over 130 years since he died. And they're just that. They're made up stories that are based on fact, but not accurate. I'm going to tell you that's part of the meaning of this. But first, the title, Wheat Field with Cypress Trees. Wheat Field with cypress is C-Y-P-R-E-S-S, trees, plural. The artist name, I think you know how to spell, but I'll spell it for you. Van Gogh, of course, two words, V-A-N, then capital G-O-G-H. 1888. Let's start out with the fact that Van Gogh was not an impressionist. Okay, so that's part of the meaning. Any word that describes what style any work of art is, whether it's a building, a sculpture, a painting, or anything, that's part of the meaning, the style of it. We talked about the Renaissance, then the ancient Greek. Those were actually facts about the meaning. I said that, I think, with both slides. But anyway, if you didn't already know about the sculpture, part of the meaning is the style is ancient Greek. The other word is classical Greek, which means ancient Greek sculpture. So that's the style of that last slide. What style is this? There is no term for it. It's his own style. So here's how you should start your meaning section. It's Van Gogh's own style. It's a post-impressionist style, though. And since this class, we don't go into impressionism, we don't go that far. My other class is still open if you're interested in. We're going to cover in much more detail all the Impressionists and then the ones that came after that. So Van Gogh came at the tag end of the Impressionist movement. He moved to Paris. He sort of experimented. The word is dabbled in that style, but he didn't like it. So he created his own style. Of course, the man was a genius. Everyone knows that by now. But not during his lifetime, they didn't. Only his brother believed in him. And a few other young artists did believe in his talent. But sadly for him, he didn't benefit from it, as you all know, right? He died penniless, totally. Some say it wasn't suicide, but most historians think he killed himself out of despair. We'll get to why in a few minutes, in a couple of minutes about.
Who do they think killed him?
Well, if he was killed, it was by two neighborhood toughs, they were called back then. They would harass him and ridicule him as, of course, a quote, crazy man. And one of them owned a gun, or his father did, and he borrowed the gun. And that's the gun that was that Van Gogh said he used to shoot himself. But to point it in the direction he would have had to point it, and to shoot himself in the stomach, which is the slowest way to die. Today he would have lived easily. He'd been taken care of. There were no doctors in that. It's a tiny little village in the center of France. So there are people who think that it was an accident of a cruel prank, threatened, a couple of teenage toughs, neighborhood bullies, whatever, who bullied him all the time. He lived.
What kind of prank ends with a bullet in the stomach?
Well, I know. Nobody knows because there's no witnesses. Yeah, but it does seem odd that if he was really trying to commit suicide, why would he shoot himself in the stomach? That is a question people can't answer. And those guys were seen harassing him that morning and then following him later that day. He died, or he was found shot he crawled back from there to his inn. So I don't want to get too off the mark here, but you don't have to write all that. But let's just go back to them. But that's an interesting question. And there are good biographies of him. And very recently, they're all called Van Gogh and Life. Well, how uncreative. Except Van Gogh's best biography, the one made into a movie I just told you about, which you could watch for extra credit, Lust for Life. That's the title of a book. In that one, they show him killing him. Well, the actor, of course, Kirk Douglas, shoots himself. And most historians still think it was suicide. But there is some evidence. The people in the town were suspicious of those two kids, that they might have done that. It could have been an accident. They could have not even realized when they took the gun from their father's shelf. They didn't have permission just to threaten and scare Van Gogh. That's possible, and didn't know it was loaded or didn't know how, they weren't aware of how dangerous it was. Who knows? Nobody knows. But that's not the point you should be writing. Let's go back to the notes for the meaning. All right. First of all, he is a post-impressionist. That's the only term people can use. That doesn't tell you what style. It just means somebody who had once been, briefly at least, he was only briefly an impressionist, and moved beyond that to create their own style. And that includes Van Gogh. If you want to know, there are others we won't cover in this class, like Gauguin was a post-impressionist, and Seurat that did all the little tiny pointed dots of color, right? You've seen some of those paintings. These are all artists who had dabbled in or practiced for a while Impressionism, moved beyond it. So all I have to write is this in a single sentence. Van Gogh was not an Impressionist. He was a post-Impressionist who created his own style. Yes, question. Sorry, is it?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then let's talk about this scene. This scene is obviously a landscape. He loved landscapes. That was what he focused on. And you could write that as part of the meaning. But he created his own style. Now, what does that mean? How do you define Van Gogh's style? This is all part of the meaning. But now some of you are going to say, wait a minute, it's overlapping with, it shouldn't be confusing. And it does overlap with the formal analysis. And that is, he used bold outlines. These are the three features that mark all of Van Gogh's landscapes. Bold outlines around all the objects, even in the bushes. Look carefully, you see them. All right, and undulating or swirling motions to most of the objects, the clouds even, the bushes, the trees, the two cypress trees, even the wheat, like the wind. I just love this painting. It's in Paris. You can see it if you go there, at the Museum of Impressionism in Paris. Yeah, so look at the wheat. It's waving in the wind. So everything's undulating. Even the mountains, the tops of the mountains look like they're undulating and writhing. Some say that's because that's how his mind was. We know that he was manic depressive, or bipolar is the phrase most people would prefer to use today, and epileptic, both. And I had a former student like that, and it was tragic to watch her go through those moods. Yeah, I was friends with her family before she took my class. Anyway, so what you have is an artist who was conveying, let's just say that he felt that all objects, whether they're living or not, human or not, had some energy or motion in them. And then the final feature that marks this as Van Gogh style is his use of color. Yellow and all the shades of gold and yellow symbolized happy emotions. Just keep it simple because we're running out of time. And then the other emotions, right? Oh, no, we're not running out of time. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. We'll still end early. So I won't rush through that. I'll tell you what that means. What are the happy human emotions? Well, some of you already can guess. Okay, joy, love, right? Acceptance, success, things that he had very little of. As you all know, I'm sure his life was tragic. He almost never had anyone in his life who treated him with kindness and believed in him, except his brother. Luckily for the world, I would say, his brother kept his paintings and his letters, both. And that's why we still have them. The letters tell us what each painting is about. If we didn't have them, we might have to guess. So we don't have to guess. This day, he was feeling some happy emotions, and then the green colors and the shades of green, all shades of green, light or dark, are symbolic of negative human emotions, which he suffered from a lot, which would be fear, anger, anxiety, and all the other kinds of, negative emotions that someone with those mental conditions, hereditary mental conditions would suffer from a lot. So the green objects in here are symbolic of some of the negative emotions he might have been feeling back and forth. There are people who theorize, we can't say for sure, that day he could have been, you don't have to write this, but some of you know, if you know anybody with bipolar. I have, by the way, a brother who also suffered from it. He was homeless for 28 years. He just popped up on the internet about 3 years ago. I thought he was dead. He's living in Dallas with another homeless guy. Anyway, life can be strange, right? So anyway, what you have here is a conflicting concept of positive and negative human emotions, which does sort of track with his mental condition that he was born with. He could have been what's called rapid cycling. You don't have to write that, but you can just say he could just say some people believe, some critics, that this painting indicates or is symbolic of his mixed emotions. That's a pretty simplistic way of saying that he was perhaps suffering back and forth or alternating. I'm sorry, I meant to say alternating between the positive and negative, or the hyper and the depressed state. Right, you know that if you know about the condition of bipolar or manic depression. most of the time it doesn't happen that rapidly, but some people, and Van Gogh probably, in fact, we know he did. He suffered from rapid mood changes that are afflicting a certain sub portion of everyone who is born with that. Of course, now there are medications and all kinds of other therapies. Didn't have them back then. There was nothing they could treat him with. Okay, so the blue, the last color, it's the last thing to write about his color theory or part. It's one of the three things that mark this as Van Gogh style. And then I'll end with two myths, keep that brief, that I hope I dispel if you believed in them, about his life that are part of me, because the artist's life is always related to their work, or almost always visible, some aspect of their experiences in life, which I just mentioned with the upper and lower, highs and lows of manic depression in the different colors. But now finally, blue and shades of blue, he said symbolize, he would have used the word God or a divine presence. He alternated between those terms. He wasn't a traditional Christian, though his father was a Christian minister. And he briefly was a minister, some of you may know this, and he was fired from his job for being too close to the poor people in that town. Never mind, that's what the Bible says you're supposed to do if you follow the teaching of Jesus, who lived homeless in the streets for years, right? Never mind that. Oh, you're not supposed to live down in the coal mines with the people in their poor shacks. He did, and he got fired. That's before he became a painter. So he had been a minister, so he had all the religious training, but he abandoned the stricter religious beliefs and just believed in a higher power, call it what you will. He called it a divine presence in the world, in the universe. And it's symbolized by the color blue in all of his landscape paintings, if there's blue in the paintings.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead. Now's a good time.
What was the second definition that you used from the waves?
The second definition of what?
You say that he used bold outlines on all the
Yes,
objects?
bold outline. Oh, undulating or writhing with a W. That's the shape of the objects here. Look at the clouds. See what I mean? Clouds don't normally do that. I mean, they can, but obviously it's an imaginary skyscape. This isn't imaginary, but he's made the shapes of the outer edges, you see, of the bushes and these trees. Look at that. Yeah. And the mountains themselves, he's exaggerated what he was seeing. In other words, stylized is the word my dad would have used, artists who paint. And my dad was both a painter and a line artist. He supported us with his artwork, sort of. My mother was both a sculptor and a painter. So these are his way of interpreting the fact that he thinks there's energy. It's very much like Native American religious beliefs. You know about that, some of you, right? I don't know if you've taken the classes on Native American history and cultures, as I did at Berkeley, but they believe in many and parts of the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, and of course many of the tribal cultures in Africa believe in that there's a spirit in everything, not just living things, let alone humans, right? So he believed that. He believes there's some kind of spirit present in everything, and that's part of why the undulating motion is on every object, including the mountains. Okay, the last thing to say about the meaning are the two myths. The one myth is that he cut off his ear, and the other is that he did it for a prostitute. There's an element of truth to both, but here are the facts, easily verifiable if you want to look them up. He cut his earlobe. Now that's bad enough, but how and why he did that was after an argument with Gauguin, and I'll spell his name because most of you have never seen his name in print, right? Gauguin. Gauguin was much more successful and famous already. When he went down to southern France to live, you could just say he lived with, you don't have to say where, Van Gogh, in Van Gogh's rented house. Van Gogh couldn't afford diddly, so his brother paid for both of them. He paid to send Gauguin down. Big mistake. Gauguin was a nasty, aggressive, sarcastic, pessimistic person. Who just verbally abused Van Gogh. And after about 2 months of this, Van Gogh got mad enough to attack him. He didn't actually physically attack him. He threatened to, after he was verbally abused by a fellow painter whose brother was paying. Can you imagine that? His rent. And that's how egotistical Gauguin was. And Van Gogh was the opposite, totally insecure and, full of anxiety. So one night they had an argument. These are the facts. You don't have to write all this. You could just say that he didn't cut his whole ear, he cut his earlobe. Keep it simple. But the facts, so you'll have the actual true story. he threatened Gauguin, Van Gogh did, but Gauguin just laughed at him and walked away and went to a brothel in town, which they had both been to before, by the way. But Van Gogh didn't follow him. He went back to the upstairs because it was, just down on the street, to their, upstairs of their rented house, and looked in the mirror, and in a fit of depression and self-loathing that happens with manic depressives often, he cut his earlobe off, which is certainly not a minor thing, but is not his whole ear. The other thing is he didn't do it for a prostitute. He did it as a result of an argument with a fellow painter that was driving him to crazy behavior, self-destructive behavior. The next morning, luckily for all of us, Gauguin returned early, probably 3-4 in the morning, who knows, from the brothel, and saw Van Gogh bleeding badly and did call a doctor, and that did save Van Gogh's life. And then he moved out the next day, and Van Gogh was for months painted himself. You've seen these, you don't have to write any of this, with a bandaged ear, self-portrait with bandaged ear. He painted several of his own portraits that way. So many weeks later, he kept, I know this is strange, but he kept the shriveled part of the earlobe, that's all it was, in a box. And that box he did send to a prostitute weeks later, or days, actually, it wasn't weeks, it was days later. But he didn't do it for a prostitute, nor because of a prostitute, or in any way with that in mind. It was all the result of an argument with Gauguin, and it wasn't his whole ear. Okay, plenty on the meaning, but you don't have to write all that last part. I just thought you might want to hear some of the facts. Okay, oh, wait a minute, we got to do the formal analysis. I've already kind of done it, but I didn't really. So let's do the color. Warm on the wheat, and that's about the only warm color, isn't it? Well, a little bit of the hills, right? There and there. Mostly cool, though, on the green plants, the blue mountains, and the white and blue clouds in the sky. Dynamic, oh man, Van Gogh is famous for almost never doing a stable. Even his self-portraits, let alone other people portraits, were dynamic. He almost never painted something with straight lines. So all the curved lines here make this totally dynamic. There's not a straight line in it. Now, also, another element of composition we haven't mentioned is balance. You see how much of the painting is sky and how much is earth. If you measure it, it's almost identical. That is the amount of the painting that's taken up with the landscape versus the skyscape. That's not an accident. It has a rough balance between the sky above and the earth below. It's a conscious thing he did with many of his landscapes, not all of them. So he has what's called, and that's a rough balance. Of course, literally something that's mirror image, symmetrical. We'll see some of those kinds of works of art for sure, even next week, where everything is completely identical left to right. Then that's, symmetrical, and that's an obvious balance. But here it's not, as exact as that. It's a rough balance. That's how you would write it. The area covered by the landscape in this painting, Van Gogh chose to use, and the other portion covered by the sky are roughly equal. Therefore, it has a rough balance, and that's top to bottom. Balance could be left to right. It's not balanced that way, is it? Left to right. But top to bottom, it is roughly balanced. And then we have the bold outline. I already mentioned that to you. But what else do we have? The shades. If you're a painter, some of you know my wife is a painter. The value of light and dark. It's more visible, I would say, in the distance of the mountains there, like for instance. But it's even noticeable on the side of the mountains here. And to some degree, on the wheat. See that there? That's shadowing, some people would call it, but it's not the right word that you should use. That's called modeling. Not the career, right? But the technique is just like the word modeling, modeling, is these will all be spelled for you and defined, written out, and then we'll go over them in detail next week. Well, I'll have a whiteboard and my own rather Mickey Mouse artwork to help explain and illustrate each technique. And you can ask any questions. But for now, just write what I'm telling you. This is modeling. The darker shading here of the underside or the front portion of the wheat, the shaded section, it's called modeling. He used modeling very realistically on the wheat field and the mountains. You don't see it too much but there's some of it on the trees too, if you look closely, because the sun must be hitting this part of the trees in this further back and, you know, sides of them. It's not. So use
Wait, I'm
modeling.
confused. What's the difference between modeling and shading?
It's the same thing. The words are synonymous, but you should use the words the way they are in Gill's book, but also the handout I give you, and just what other art historians and art critics and artists would say. They would use the word modeling. And so that's the preferred term. Okay. And then let's see. I already said this is there. Oh, yeah. Mass. That's another thing. Mass is one of the other techniques. We'll go on to the last slide. We'll end just a little bit early, depending on how many questions you guys have on the final slide. Okay, this has different areas and sizes. So for instance, these trees are bigger than the bushes, aren't they? Right? And the wheat field, at least the way it's painted in this painting, the portion of it that covers the wheat field is covering, is bigger than the mountains, what you can see of them. Those are all areas of mass or volume. Those two words, you can use either one, are what you look for when you look for the different sizes of parts or objects in a work of art. So mass or volume is the comparable size. So what is the largest mass or volume in this painting? It depends on how you look at it. There's a lot of flexibility on this element. I give you a lot of flexibility in your papers. If you see something differently than me, as long as you explain it in 1 or 2 sentences, why you see it the way you do, I'll give you credit, even if I don't. If the sky is considered one single area or mass, that's the largest mass, isn't it? Then it would be probably the wheat field. But if you don't consider that, the sky, each cloud is a separate mass, then you'd say the wheat field is the largest mass, and then the biggest cloud, and then maybe these trees are almost joined together, aren't they? They're growing up together. So you can say the 2 cypress trees are the third largest, or I'm sorry, the mountain chain, whoops, is the third largest. It's close, but I think that's slightly bigger area total if you count the whole area of the mountains. And then maybe the 4th largest. So what do you have to do? You don't have to give me more than 3. When you're writing on your papers or in the exams about what the different sizes of the areas or objects in a painting, a drawing, a sculpture, whatever are, which are the 3 largest is all you have to give me. Okay, yeah, it's doing that. Now let's hope it, whoops, sorry, I usually wait just, there, hopefully that. Okay, we got one more. And this is not a minor one, so you want to take this, the notes.
Sorry, I have a question. Could you repeat what you say about the volume and that? Because I didn't hear it because it cut it off.
Okay, well, as long as people don't mind us going all the way to 9:30, which is okay. That's what we're supposed to do, because that way it's okay. This first class is important. Yeah, the different sections or areas covered by parts of a painting, we'll just say a painting for now, but it's true for drawings or photos or sculpture, any work of art, especially in a painting. What is the largest section here? If you think of it as the sky, some people say, oh, that's not one single object, it's a bunch of clouds. So you could see it either way. I would see it as one mass. The cloud area, or it's the right word in art is cloudscape, right? The area covered by the painting of the sky or clouds in the sky is the largest mass if you see it as a single object or section. What's the second largest mass? Well, there's no debating that. It'd be the wheat field.
Your audio is breaking up again, Professor.
Yeah, I think it does not want us to know about mass.
I'm going to repeat these things next week, and we're going to discuss in very much detail when I do the handout and go over, the handout with you. So if it's not clear, don't worry about it tonight. It's very early on, so I can understand if it's not clear. Let me ask though, have the audio at least stabilized, people? I hope so. Okay, good. Oh, no. Good. All right. Here's what
there he is back.
Yeah. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to go back to finish. Did somebody still have a question about mass or volume?
Yeah, you cut out for the whole entire part of mass and volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Mass is a relative size of objects in a painting. We'll keep it simple, call just for painting, but it applies to all art, all visual arts. What's the largest section of this painting? The sky, if you see the sky as a single object, right? Or section. So here's how you'd write that. The largest mass of this painting, if you see the sky as a single section or object or part of the whole painting, which I do, you'd say the largest mass. You only have to give me the first three, the three largest.
Wow, God, really?
I think you should just move on.
Yeah, he's not allowed to talk about this anymore.
Like
painting math guy.
We'll do mass
It
next
looks
week.
like three gods have first.
Let's try this.
Talking about other-
Yeah, we better stop before we get killed by a sea serpent.
Well, let me try this. I hope you can see this one. 'Cause, yeah, if you can't, then whoops. So that's going too far, right? Okay. Let me give it one more try because this
You're
is
not
important.
screen sharing anymore. We can't see the slides.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me give it. I'm going to give it one other try. Hang on. I know you're going to say, what? Why not just give up? Because there's still enough time we could do this last one and it would not. Let's see if we can do the screen sharing thing here. Okay, where is the screen sharing? Speaker view, gallery view, full screen. Poseidon says, no, I like that. That's clever. I'm going to give it one more minute. Okay, don't give up yet. And I will myself if we can't do this in a minute. No, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Oh, okay. What is this? Come on. Okay. Poseidon says no. I can't get this to go over. Otherwise, I could do it.
It says your bandwidth is low. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, that's what I figured. But all right, then this is an architecture slide. So you know what I'll do? I'll see if we have time next week. We have so much to go over, but we might start with it. In fact, why don't we do this? We'll call it early ending because it's not that early. What is it, 9:18 or something? We would have been able to finish on time and even a few minutes early. So I'll do just this slide. Don't forget that at the start of the slide portion of next week. But don't forget the most important thing we're going to do in the first half is the elements of composition. Look for that handout. It'll be in your cubbies, your student inbox, email to you by Friday at the latest, probably tomorrow. And print it out, have it with you. And
I have a question.
Now I will stick around for questions for everybody who wants. Please go ahead. Yes, please. Can you hear me?
My question is, yes, I can.
Thank you.
My question is, the question that I wanted to ask is, what exact? I didn't have a piece of paper in front of me when you explained what you wanted us to send you.
Okay, I'll tell you now. I'll just tell you. It's very easy. Yeah, it's a mini, I call it a mini, short biography. Call it that when you email to me. Say mini bio, your name and the class, which of course is obviously Art 1.1 in the tagline of your email. So email me this 3 things, and you can keep it short, 2 or 3 sentences for each of 3 questions. First, okay, where you have lived and worked, if you've traveled or you've lived anywhere outside the Bay Area, okay? That's the first one, all right? The second thing is your work or educational experience. Some people haven't had a job yet, I guess, perhaps, but if you have, what kind of works situation or jobs have you had? And what educational background? You keep these brief, 2 or 3 sentences each, okay? It's the second thing. The third thing is your experience in art, whether you've created art, you have family members who are artists, you've studied it, or you're just interested in knowing more about a certain type of art. And that's the final section. And again, you should be able to do all those in, a paragraph. Half a page is enough. And then make a PDF if you can. That's what I can open for sure. If you send me a screenshot, it might be harder for me to read and I'd have to ask you to send it again. Please do that if you can before the next class. In fact, earlier, as soon as you can, by tomorrow would be, or later tonight. I will start logging them in, and that's how I will know how many students, or not how many, but which students are definitely going to continue. And there are a few people dropping, but not many. It looks like we had 44 students out of 50 that are enrolled. Does anybody need an ad code? No one said they need an ad code, or you couldn't probably get online if you
need one.
Right. Yeah.
I need one. I'm on the wait.
Okay.
I'm on the wait list.
Good. go. I'm glad they let you guys do that, because I wanted to encourage anyone who's on the wait list to go ahead and join the class tonight. So good. Then would you send me an email and ask me for the well, you know what? I can give you right now. What am I saying? Here it is. I have these. So write this down and I will cross it out that you're the only one who can use this ad code. Okay, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
All right. It is, all capital letters, right? K, right? The letter K, and then N as in Nancy, and then the number 54, and then M as in mountain.
Okay.
Okay, KN54M. And that'll be just yours, and you should be enrolled formally and show up on my roster by next week. So don't forget to ask me near the beginning or at the break or before the class is over next week.
I'm not exactly sure what to do with the number. Like,
well, that you'll have to deal with the Office of Records and Admissions.
Okay.
If they put you on the wait list, you have their email address, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and they should be able to tell you, or you can call them, although they might be pretty busy, but they should be able to tell you on the phone too.
I believe if you're on the wait list, you don't need an ad code.
Oh, okay.
I think that because you're already receiving his emails, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
so I believe if you're on the wait list, you're already technically in the class. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's
okay. Well, I'll just double check.
Yeah, you just have to wait
know.
for anybody who's going to drop out, and then like it'll move you into the class officially.
Yeah, which looks likely. We're supposed to have 45 slots and we had 44 people. So at least one new slot should open up, and maybe more. Usually after the first week, a couple more people shift out of one class, of course, into another. Okay, so if you want you have the ad code, but it would be helpful if you email me and tell me if you were able to get confirmation. Then I'll double check that and I'll just email you. You don't even have to ask me, and we don't need to take time with it in class next week to say, yes, I see you're on the roster.
Sounds good.
Okay, anybody else needs an ad code? Sure, you're welcome. Anybody else? Well, I thank you all for your patience. We got to 3 out of 4 slides, and everything else we intended. It's pretty good, about 90% success rate before the Greek gods intervened. Okay. All right. I look forward to a very interesting semester, and thank you for your participation. And I'll see you all next week. And I think I can guarantee that whatever happens, if I need to go out to a different, which I will do, my own computer, my PC, which I know works for me to contact all of you by email, not the laptop, I'll just do it that way. And then you'll all at 6:15, don't forget, between then and 6:30, check your email for the login. There we go. Login info about next week's Zoom meeting. That's how we do it every week. So I'll see you all by 6:30 next week. Okay. And you can email me if you have any other questions in the meantime. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.